Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Bad Backs and Backlogs podcast. This is me, owner of the channel, Brian.
It's John Downing, back again.
And Jeremy Kincaid, first timer.
Yes, so we're gonna be talking about Diablo in this podcast, as the title suggests. We're gonna start out talking about Diablo 4 and our impressions with the game, and then we'll jump into a very brief exploration of Diablo 1 and 2. Led by me. Diablo 3 will come after. PoE and the rest of the ARPG genre will be the fourth thing we discuss, and at the end we will answer the title question of, is Diablo 4 the best ARPG game ever made or not? Before we get too deep into this, we need to take a second and explain what an ARPG is for those of you who don't know. I think I am not qualified to say that since I have played the least of them. So what makes an ARPG, John?
Oh, no. Yeah. Action RPGs basically involves it is a character builder game where you basically level up your character, and it involves a lot of killing groups of enemies as fast as possible usually. And it usually involves a lot of loot dropping. If there's items that drop with different stats usually, with different levels from common to magic to rare to legendary. And these are used to change your character's stats and abilities, and that allows you to kind of dig into different ways, different builds in order to kill more things, kill things faster, try different ways of doing it, and trying to get more and better loot. That's basically what it is for me, honestly. It's very simplistic.
We're going to be using some jargon in this episode, and the main jargon that that I know from it would be just you've got loot, you've got your DPS, you've got your XP and everything else, but there's probably more specific stuff that we'll talk about when we get to PoE and things like that. If we use a piece of like a word or an acronym that we haven't used before, we'll take a second to explain what that is. The first thing I want us to talk about in terms of Diablo 4, and the first thing that I noticed was the MMO likeness of it, like likedness of it. And MMO refers to massively multiplayer online, but it typically means games like World of Warcraft or something like that if you're talking about the genre. So the first question I have is, how do we all feel about the online-only aspects of Diablo 4? Something that is a first for the franchise.
It's interesting. There's positive aspects. It's nice to be able to discover. It's nice to be able to discover that there's actually like other people fighting things in the world out there, and be able to join them. It's kind of an exciting aspect. The negative aspect I have about it is that you if you want to just play the game by yourself, you'll just be playing along, and out of nowhere, the rubber band backwards into a pack of enemies and instantly die, which is not exactly something where you're like, oh boy, I'm glad I'm able to play with randos. It's like, I want to fight a dungeon, and I can't because the server decided I'm not here. I'm with that group of enemies I was running away from 3 seconds ago, and now I'm dead. Thank you.
On that, I actually killed somebody on accident once because they were AFK. Away from keyboard, for someone who doesn't know, I drug a group of enemies to them on accident. I was just running through, I was just passing through, and those enemies keyed on them instead and killed them. And they were just sitting there,
I've had that people attempt that on me several times, not as if they were trying. They were just riding a horse going by, and I was just checking out my own stats, and out of nowhere, a group of goatmen start punching me in the face, and I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, and the thing is, they might have DC'd, and that's why they were AFK or something like that, and then they come back and they're just dead.
Yeah.
So, I understand kind of why they wanted it to be online only, but another thing that's kind of problematic about this is, as I've talked before on the channel, I'm going to be without internet for like a week or two or something like that, and I just won't be able to play the game at all because you can't play if you don't have internet for Diablo 4.
A lot of games have been going towards that model recently, so it's just an unfortunate aspect for the most part. I'm glad that a lot of the content is basically single player. Like all the dungeons, you don't just go in with a rando, even though sometimes it's actually kind of nice to have somebody help kill stuff for you, especially since a lot of the boss fights are just either you can do it easily or you just can't.
Yeah, the
It's
game
a common thing in action RPGs.
the game gets so much easier if you have friends. I think, like, if they're actively there with you. I think the fact that it can be played single player for pretty much the entire time, if you wanted to. I played most of it single player. A lot of MMOs went that way. Pretty much every MMO that's alive, you can play solo to end game pretty much all the way, and you're fine. I do like that because I think most of the time Diablo or these ARPGs are solo experiences. So that really didn't make me feel bad. And something that I found was kind of interesting is I think part of the reason I like Diablo 4 is because of the MMO lightness of it. Because I like the random encounters I have with some people where you're just striding around the world. It makes it feel more alive. It makes it feel more full. Sometimes somebody will compliment you as you're running around, or they'll look at your gear because they can expect you and see what you have, and they can say "nice" and then say goodbye. Or the PvP areas. I actually did a little bit of PvP because I wanted to get the trophy for it on PlayStation, and I really liked the kind of some of the PvP interactions. I mean, it really is like who presses the button first wins, but that wasn't always how it worked, and I was able to beat people 10 levels above me at sometimes. It was really cool.
I think if it was an open world without the MMO aspect, I think that would be really sad because that world would not feel full.
Yeah, I mean the world would feel very empty because it's open world, but it's open world in the same way that a game like Metal Gear Solid 5 was open world, where it was really just open lanes to combat areas, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like it's not open world in the sense that like I don't know the way that I define open world, which is games like Skyrim or I haven't played Elden Ring, but Elden Ring,
Grand vistas that
GTA 5
that attracts you to it. Something, set pieces that make it so you're like, oh, that's something in the distance I can go towards and enjoy, or some event that's associated. Or like the Fallout games, even like Fallout 1 and 2.
Well, yeah,
you find a town.
You get to run around. You get to have experiences in the open world, right? And I don't think it's an open world game. And I don't think, just so we're clear, I don't think every game needs to be an open world game. I'm actually kind of sick of every game being an open world game. I don't need that to be the case, and I don't want it to be the case anymore. I'm perfectly fine with it being that way. It just doesn't have the open world that I define as being like the key parts of like an open world game, and that's perfectly fine to me. Yeah. I like it. I really do like it as is. I thought there was a nice biome distribution as I went around, and I was seeing new stuff all the time, but I just didn't care about, oh hey, what's in the distance over there, because once again it's isometric, which means above the player, so it's not like you can see anything in the distance and go to it. You're just looking at yourself and the mobs that you're killing.
So like,
but you do get to discover the strongholds. And
the strongholds were cool.
If you actually search for all the Lilith statues, that's a lot of the good open world aspect behind it. But outside of that, yeah, the open world aspect didn't really come in much for Diablo 4.
Yep, I would agree with that one. As I had mentioned, there are some MMO light elements. I know that I've played an MMO. I know that John has played something that is considered an MMO, but it's not like the traditional kind.
It's Warframe.
Warframe is considered an MMO.
Because it doesn't have the open world aspect. It's a party system. So instead of being like an open world like in World of Warcraft, where you just kind of like meet people like you do in Diablo 4, where they're just out there in the environment, it is a party system where you join missions and other players can join you.
Yeah, but don't you have like hub worlds?
They've introduced hub worlds. They added that later, so it went from being what they call quote unquote MMO game to more of an MMO game. But the funny thing is, even if they have hub worlds, when you enter the actual hub world itself proper, it ends up actually being yet again another party game where you join with like 3 other players. So it's not necessarily like you're separated from that party system.
Yeah, and I played one MMO for 450 hours my senior year of college. I played Final Fantasy 14. Huge Final Fantasy fan, but we're not going to get on that today. But I am if you talk to somebody who only plays MMOs or only plays an MMO, they would say, well, 450 hours is just the start. That's when it starts. think it's enough to know whether the genre is good enough or not for me. And I like the genre. I like a lot. So I think as we will discuss, as we'll be very clear as we go through this discussion, the RPG genre is actually one I've not been a huge fan of before this game, and I think the MMO elements are part of what make me like it so much. It's part of what keeps bringing me back to it. Even though I've been playing it primarily solo, there's something about MMOs that make the world feel more dynamic and alive. I come across somebody, I will never see them again. They're a stranger to me, but sometimes they drop a cool legendary for me that I just trash because I don't need it.
Yeah.
But it's still cool.
Or you're just running by and they complete a quest for you, and you're just like, fantastic, free stuff.
Free stuff, yeah. I mean, I have to admit that aspect of the game is actually really exciting.
Yeah,
I have to admit,
I do like that.
I do get bothered though whenever I'm just sitting there and some random person's like, "Do you want to join my party?" And there's been none of those interactions where you're like, it would make sense if I was like, "Hi," and like did any emote, any interaction. No, I'm a person who exists and breathes, and I'm like, perfect, good enough for me.
Or you haven't seen a player in like 2 minutes and you have a party invite and you're like, where did this come from?
Yeah. That's happened to me a couple times. I get it. That kind of stuff happens in MMOs as well. But I didn't mind. I just say no. That's it. It's perfectly fine.
I do every time. But just like, who are you? What are you doing here?
On the channel, there's going to be a whole series about MMOs eventually. It's not going to happen anytime soon. But I plan at some point to play through all of the ones that are still alive. From start to boredom. And interestingly enough, the first one that's still alive came out the same year as Diablo 1. It's still around.
World of Warcraft?
No, World of Warcraft came out in 2004. It's Ultima Online, which came out in 1997.
Ultima Online.
Yeah, Ultima Online. We're not going to get into it today. It's a nice little piece of trivia if you need to know that. Ultima Online is still around with, I think, 5,000 active players a day. And it's been around that long. And it's the game that introduced the world to PKing, which is player killing.
Oh,
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Is this a good open world? We've kind of talked about this question a little bit, but I think we can focus a little bit more on it. I've mentioned that I think that this is open world in the same way that like MGS5, which Metal Gear Solid 5, where you travel down lanes until the next major combat encounter. I don't mind that. I'm perfectly fine with it being that way. But the open world, when somebody says something's open world, I think Tears of the Kingdom. I think
Witcher.
Skyrim. I think Witcher. That's what I think of. And even Witcher is a little bit more limited because it's like open areas that you explore. You have like 2 of them. But that one fits. You get to go anywhere, any way that you want. Zelda, as we talked last time, the open world is literally one of the biggest selling points of the game. If you were telling me that I have like 30 seconds to explain what this game is, and get somebody sold on it, open world is not going to be 2 of the words I use to explain
That's
it.
actually a very accurate way to describe it.
I think I said it earlier. It doesn't feel like it justifies the open worldness that it tried to do. Yes, you can go and explore, and finding strongholds is a cool thing, but
they're not common enough.
There's 3 in each section. I think there's 4 or 5 sections, so there's only like 15 of them. Finding Lilith statues is kind of cool, but it's not like amazing.
Yeah, and eventually what I ended up doing is I looked up a guide on where they all were just because I needed the stat bonuses for all my other characters.
And it's not worth the discovery of finding them.
No.
The first several are cool.
It's sometimes cool to just find one on accident and it gives you an extra Paragon point, which we'll talk later about what that means. Mm-hmm. That's sometimes really, really cool. And there are things about the open world that are cool, like the renown system. I actually think is really awesome for your eternal characters, where basically the way the system works is as you complete side quests, strongholds, find altars, finish dungeons, you get renown points, and there is a account-wide bonus where you get extra skill points, Paragon points, max currency for a special type of currency.
Potions.
And potions
is the big one.
Number of potions that you get. These are all really cool things, and they're account wide as long as you're playing Eternal. And we'll talk about the differences between Eternal and Hardcore later. Those are separate. But what was really cool is, I play my character. I have a hard time finding my skill points. I start my next character, start with basically, I am technically level 1 or 0, I guess, in this game. Technically level 0, but it feels like I'm level 11 because I have 11 skill points starting out with my next character.
And it makes starting a new character actually really enjoyable. When oftentimes in other games such as PoE, sometimes it can just be very frustrating.
What's PoE stand for? Path of Exile.
Path of Exile, which is a very
we're getting there.
We'll get there eventually, but it's one I've played often.
Yeah, well, and that's something that really makes me think that this, even if this is not Game of the Year, this is going to be the most replayable Game of the Year, I think. Possibly. I think when you roll credits on Zelda, you're probably going to set down Zelda,
Yeah, true,
I think,
true.
and you're not going to play it anymore. Most people, they'll be hundreds of hours in before they do that. But it's not the type of game where you're like, you finish it and you're like, oh, I want to play that again. Diablo 4 literally is that type of game. I finished the credits, and they have a mechanic where when you finish the story, you can skip it on all your other characters, which is a godsend, honestly. And I really like how once I finished it, I just made 4 new characters and played around with the other classes a little bit. Yeah. Something I don't do very often. And the last game I did that in was Final Fantasy XIV, the MMO I talked about.
Yep.
So I think that the rewards for engaging in the quote unquote open world are honestly the best part about the open world. Diablo obviously is not just its open world, though, because this is actually one of the few games in 2023 that have loading screens. And one of the main things that you're going to be doing for XP and for loot and stuff like that is you're going to be going into dungeons. And dungeons are very important for a few reasons. One, they give you renown, which it helps that one system that we were just talking about. But also, you get a permanent unlock for like a skill that you can put on your equipment that can enhance your build.
Oh yeah,
that is also account wide.
What's it called?
Aspects, legendary aspects, right? So we need to roll back a second and let's talk first about what that means. Okay, so equipment in Diablo 4, and this is going to be for people not really familiar with the genre. If you're familiar with the genre, you can kind of like just follow along with us here. The equipment is broken into tiers. They're colored tiers, but you've got your shit tier, nothing.
Called common.
You've got your rare, I think.
No, we got magic.
Magic is blue. You've got legendary, which is red.
Yellow, which is
rare. Okay, yellow's rare.
PoE knowledge.
And you've got your red, which is legendary, and then there are 2 tiers above that you can't get until you play in the harder difficulties.
Okay.
Those are sacred and ancestral. I've only ever found 1 piece of ancestral gear so far after 60 hours in. Yeah. And I've found plenty of sacred gear.
I would start with those, honestly, because when you play these games, you really want to find those types of gear. When we talk PoE later and we talk about builds or whatever we're talking about, gear comes up and it is going to be, gee, I'm going to build around this particular piece of gear, and it's a super special, unique, ancestral, whatever, that defines the build.
Yeah.
It lets you do crazy, crazy things.
This actually happened to me. I'm playing a lightning sorcerer build, right? So I shoot lightning bolts constantly. My build originally was all about building basically currents. I had to shoot out energy to get energy back, right? I found an item that gave me rewards for stunning enemies, and I completely changed my build to instead be the type of sorcerer that's based on critical strikes and also just permanently chain stunning enemies over and over and over again. And that's my build now. I deal 3 times my damage to stunned enemies, and that means that as soon as a boss or as soon as an enemy is stunned, they're dead. And if an elite, which is a bigger, stronger version of an enemy, is in the room and I kill it, that becomes 8 times damage because it doubles it. 2. It doubles
And you're
my
already
damage.
critting, so
and I'm
you're-
already critting
So it's
and
even
everything. So
16 times.
there are times, and you can see these happen on my streams, where I seem to be doing very little damage. Somebody gets stunned, and then everybody in the room dies. So it's a really, really fun build. I've had a lot of fun with it, but I've also noticed that there's really cool builds for every other character, and we'll talk about those in a second. What I really like about that is that I would not have discovered the build if a piece of equipment didn't give me the idea for the build. And I really like that kind of stuff, because I'm going completely guideless my entire time playing the game.
Yeah.
So we kind of went from dungeon to aspect to types of gear.
Yeah.
You need to cycle back. What are aspects?
The aspects, basically, if you've got a piece of legendary gear, the thing that we're talking about is you have some super special passive bonus, whether it's like your lightning spell now, instead of shooting forward, circles around you or something, or you get 2 of them, or you get double the cast or something, right? There's 150 possibilities of these, I think, so it's really hard to explain in a short time.
Yeah, it basically takes a skill or a mechanic, and it gives it a secondary effect in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
And that effect is good in some way.
Yeah, and this is what like the game becomes as soon as you can get into. As soon as you start getting legendaries, the game comes into finding the best thing to put on your legendaries or your rares to turn them into a higher tier weapon.
Which is a unique system about the aspects that I really enjoy. In other action RPG games, legendary items, which are these aspects effectively, tend to have these build-defining abilities. They're legendary because they tend to apply something like skill-changing, ability-changing, or some unique mechanic related to crits or health, or you name it. If it's in the game, a legendary can change it. And this is where people tend to build around them. But the limitation usually is that legendary items are locked in most other games. A legendary item can be like something really cool, but it has really terrible, for example, stats.
Well, the thing you're getting to specifically is the fact that this is, I think, the first game that let you create the legendaries with specific aspects.
So in this game, what they did, those aspect parts, those unique parts of the legendary gear, is actually a piece that you can take off of that item by destroying it, and then you get to keep that legendary ability, that aspect, and then apply it to a different weapon, turning it into a legendary, but with the stats you want, which is extremely awesome for an action RPG game where you want to min-max your character to do as much damage.
It's insane, because I took an aspect that said you deal 68% more damage to stunned enemies.
Yeah.
That's my aspect, right?
Yeah.
And then I comboed it with something that gave me 50% basic skill attack, which is just your regular attack that costs nothing, right? And so now that becomes my stun loop, because that move has like a 10% chance to stun.
Yeah.
So every second I stun somebody, basically every second or 2 seconds.
Yeah,
it's all percent chances. Sometimes that doesn't happen in that way, and it's just
any other game, that item you would have to have 2 items to do that, because you'd have to have the item that gives you this increased stun damage, and that's by itself, because that's all it can do, and then any other item that enables it.
Yep.
This game lets you combine them, which means the build variety has exploded, which is absurd.
Yeah, it's insane. I really like my build. I have to have 3 specific aspects to make it work. I've got to have the one for stun damage. I got to have one for basic skill increase. So my basic skill is like 300%, I think, right now. Speed, right? And then I need also something that will randomly double my ultimate casts, and that's how my build works. And it works every time, as long as I have those 3. So every time I come across a piece of gear that has those, I will trash it for the aspect, keep the aspect, and keep going. And you know what's awesome about this thing? Some of those are rewards for dungeons, and they are permanent.
Oh, yes.
Right. You get to keep, you can do it as many times as you want, because if you trash an aspect and you use it on something, the aspect is gone. You can't just keep spamming it. But you can keep spamming the ones from the dungeons, which sometimes are weaker versions of the effect, but they're kind of like middle grounds, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's exactly what you need to get your build finished up. And so one of the things that I think makes dungeon grinding in this game better than any other one of these I've ever played is the fact that you get a permanent reward that you actually want out of it.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it's for a class you're not playing, but it does not matter, because that means that it's just telling you, hey, this is something you can do with the other class. How about you experiment with that class sometime?
Yeah.
So I really like that. I think that even though the dungeon design, the layout is pretty basic, and once you've done, like, I think I've done maybe 50, 60, 70 at this point, I've seen pretty much every dungeon layout that they have available.
That is a negative aspect I have with this game, because their open world is it has the most variety, but like once you enter the dungeons proper, the area where you're going to be grinding for gear, grinding for experience, they have a very, very simplistic and repetitive design that I honestly just do not really enjoy compared to other action RPG games.
I think there's only like 4 or 5 different things you do in the dungeon, and it's usually you pick 2 of them and you do them back to back, and then you fight a boss sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. And I actually prefer the ones where you don't have to fight the boss, to be honest with you, most of the time. Because I've fought all the bosses at this point. And that might change once I get into, like, the Ancestral and Nightmare Dungeons, which are just harder versions of these things. But as of right now, I'm content to play the dungeon, get the loot, and get the permanent upgrade for my other characters I want to play sometime. The bosses, I think, are actually a remarkable improvement versus every ARPG I've ever played. I think that this is another element that's very MMO-like, because they have the same cones of damage that MMO bosses have. And that means that you have to position yourself. And I think what I like really about it is that the game asks you to constantly watch what the boss is doing and be mobile, because before you get like really insanely good gear, these bosses will sometimes just straight up murder you.
Yeah, you're also playing a sorcerer.
I am, so I'm pretty squishy, but sometimes you have died in the dungeon and I have not.
Yes, because I was playing the barbarian and I was up in its face and I'm just whacking away at it with my stick, and you're doing all the damage, and I'm just there to be like, hey, focus me.
Well, starting out, I do all the stun, and then once the stun happens, the boss dies.
Yes, yeah.
The thing about the bosses that is interesting in this game in comparison to other Diablo games is just how long the battles are. You actually have to interact with the actual the enemies' like actual abilities. You actually have to learn it. A lot of action RPG games I've experienced, especially PoE is a good example, and that game is one of the most like base action RPG as you can be. And those boss fights tend to turn into either 2 things. Either one, you one-shot the boss because your build does billions of DPS, or millions in this case, or the boss one-shots you because it deals a damage so enormous, even if you were to reduce its damage by 90%, it still one-shots you by 3 times your health.
Yeah, there was only one time I actually had to learn, and that was the Righteous Fire build, where I followed the guide and it just said get more health, which didn't help my damage in any way, shape, or form at that point. So I actually had to interact with bosses, and that was terrible.
Because then Jeremy actually had to know what their abilities did. That game, legitimately, there's times where you will face a boss that has its own unique design, and you'll never know what it does because you one-shot it. Because you enter the area. And other times, you even learn its abilities because you walk in, it looks at you and points at you, and you instantly die because that was its attack. But in this game, what I've enjoyed is the fact that because they've kind of scaled it a little better so that you don't just go overpowered or underpowered super easy, you're actually able to interact with the boss and have a actual combat, as opposed to one of us, either the boss or me, enter a Mexican standoff, and one of us points and kills the other one instantly.
And I could tell you like every boss that I've encountered in this game and roughly what they do, even if I haven't seen them for 20 hours. But if you asked me what the bosses in one of these other ARPGs were, I would just tell you it was a health bar.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
True, yeah.
Now, the strongholds all have unique bosses. I don't think any of the strongholds get repeated, right?
No, I've done every single stronghold. They are all unique. However, they have unique bosses, but sometimes the bosses are just big versions of mobs.
Yeah, that's
what I was gonna say too.
But the dungeons will repeat bosses, and
they will.
That's an issue I do have, because I do remember one time I finished a dungeon, I went into the next one, and it was literally the exact same boss.
I don't mind that because sometimes I think it's cool to replay bosses.
That is
but
true.
I think that they need more, so there is more variety. I think that's true. I will say that there is a spider boss that like will put webs everywhere and poisons and stuff. And it's really cool combo actually for like the way that the CC works, which is crowd control, which basically means like restricting movement of something,
so
right?
Stunning, freezing, slowing, taunting, those are all types of crowd control. And the idea is to control a crowd. So if you're the barbarian and you're tanking, you can taunt the enemies to attack just you and leave your squishy guys alone.
Yep. And I think that it's really cool that I just think it's really cool that like there was a boss that I only uncovered like 40 hours in that other people uncovered 5 hours in, and I think that's cool. I do think that there probably needs to be maybe 2 times the number of bosses in the game for variety's sake, because there are 130 dungeons. You are going to come across them all. They are going to repeat, and sometimes, like Jeremy said, you're going to come across the same boss 3 dungeons in a row.
I've fought like the Blood Bishop so many times, like an absurd amount of times. There's a boss called the Blood Bishop. And he's just a giant flesh monster who's supposed to be some like advanced form of a vampire. And I fought him because we all, as Brian said, you discover bosses kind of randomly as you go. It depends on whether you decide to enter a dungeon or not, or some quest leads you to do it, which is kind of an interesting thing. But in my case, an extraordinary large percentage of my bosses I fought through my first playthrough was that frickin' bishop. He'd show up and I'm like, I know how to kill you. I know what you do. Die.
Yeah. It's the Tomb Lord for me. I get the Tomb Lord. Every time I stream, I get the Tomb Lord 2 or 3 times. Every time. And
Can you remind me who the Tomb Lord is?
Tomb Lord is the one that puts up the bone walls.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah.
And the bones, or the walls explode.
The walls explode. Yeah. So I come across him all the time. I know his thing. We show up and I'm like, hey, buddy, I know what's going on here. What's good? And then we go ahead and set him to rest. Yeah, I'll stun him in 10 seconds and the boss in 2 seconds later. Yep. And it's over. But that being said, I am going to stick on my guns here and say that the boss design is cool. Really cool. Yeah. I think, and nobody really cares about the story in Diablo 4, so I don't think it's bad to talk about in-game stuff. The story takes 10 hours. It's not Zelda where it takes sometimes 100 hours.
You just do
the final boss.
Spoilers alert. Spoilers alert.
Yeah. Well, spoiler warning. It's for the next second here. But we're going to take 1 second to talk about the final boss of the game, and that's Lilith.
Yeah.
I loved Lilith's fight. I thought Lilith's fight was really cool.
That's a very cool fight. He actually interacts with the arena.
Yep.
And when it becomes a very unique fight, that's where it's a good boss design.
Mm-hmm. And I think her boss design is really interesting too. She almost straight up killed Jeremy because he didn't realize that she was cutting off a zone of the floor.
The board. Oh yeah, and the bosses have little triangles in their health bar.
Oh yeah.
That once you get their HP below that point, they drop health potions. Sometimes 1, sometimes 2, maybe 3.
I've seen 3 and 4.
I've seen 3.
Yeah, during that fight, she had dropped the health potions on the part of the floor that had already been cut off. So I'm down like 2 health potions, and I'm actually running out at this point.
Yeah, and it also affected me a little bit. So the Lightning Sorcerer has a mechanic where they're able to refill mana by picking up little lightning balls that spawn off of their abilities. All of mine also were off the stage, so I was out of mana for a couple seconds. It was really cool. I enjoyed that fight a lot. I can't wait to fight the harder version in the Ancestral Dungeons later, the one that can one-shot you.
Uber version, yep.
The Uber Lilith.
Huey's full of Uber bosses.
Yes, because it's easy content.
Well, it's easy content. That is a boss fight that I wouldn't mind doing again.
Yeah, and you don't do this for like the Blood Bishop. You don't make an Uber Blood Bishop that summons twice as many walls.
I guarantee you I will find the Uber Blood Bishop.
Shut up. You do it for the rememberable bosses, the unique ones, the ones that are actually really cool to fight. And there are definitely those, but then there are also not those.
Yeah. Lilith, honestly, is one of the best isometric bosses I've ever come across, I think. Really cool boss design.
Yeah.
Not from software level, but really good stuff, you know?
From Software isometric game.
Yeah, I don't think that'll ever happen,
no,
but they could
no.
go first person again. We'll talk about that in August. The classes that we've talked about, I want us to talk about the classes too, and we're just going to go down the line, and Jeremy's going to talk a little bit about barbarians, and then I'll talk about my barbarian.
I like how you just listed the 5 classes and you have stuff for sorcerer and druid and then nothing for the other 3 classes.
At the time that I wrote this, at the time that I wrote my speaker notes, I hadn't played the others enough, but I do have something to say about them all.
So, I mean, the 5 classes, barbarian, rogue, sorcerer, druid, necromancer, very similar to like Diablo 3 classes. They're missing witch doctor and crusader.
And I want to talk about Crusader at the very end, and what I hope that it's like.
Yeah, but I assume later on they'll add in those classes.
Yeah, probably.
That tends to be their incentive for getting the DLC.
Yeah, initially, and I'm getting to barbarian for a sec. Initially, I like playing, much like John does, summoners or spell-based people. But you do that enough times, you're just like, I've done this. Yes, it's going to be easy. Yes, I'm going to have tons of damage. But I want to play something new. And I did the druid during the beta. And John had a rogue. And I think you had already done the sorcerer. Because I jumped in a little bit late. So I picked between barbarian and necromancer. And it was the whole necromancer, done it. I'm going to do barbarian. And he's just the traditional barbarian. He uses his stick. He smacks things. The cool thing that he has is that he actually has 4 weapons. And you switch between a 2-hander, 2 1-handers, or another 2-hander. And you can make it so that your different abilities will use specific weapons, or you can just let it automatically pick for whichever one would be the best. Like Ryan did, I didn't use a guide. I just went in and I picked the skills that seemed cool. There was one that stunned after like 4 hits, which I said, sure, I like stuns. Your next ability is like an AoE spell, area of effect, something that will hit multiple targets. And then you get like a shout that gave like Wrath, which is the barbarian's primary resource. And I think it gave you Unstoppable, so you couldn't be stunned. And then as I was going, I was just picking skills that I liked. And it wasn't until afterwards, when we were playing with John, trying to finish up the campaign, that I felt like my damage was bad. And I went ahead and I looked at a guide, and there was a whirlwind build. Okay, you just spin around dealing damage. And
that was my Diablo 3 build.
It didn't feel good because I didn't have the Wrath generation, because it needs like 12 Wrath per second. And I just couldn't sustain that. Especially because I tested this against the boss and right outside the little tower thing in the desert. So there wasn't like stuff to hit to generate Wrath. So I switched over and I did a bleed build. Bleed build, realistically, there wasn't a lot of like decisions to be made. The interesting thing about it is that you don't pick an ultimate ability. So that was a little bit weird, but that's what the build said, so I followed it. And it actually felt like I could kill things pretty quickly at that point. Bleed, you hit them, their health bar changes color for a portion of it, and it will slowly tick down over time. And the left click does a little bit of bleed, but generates Wrath. And then the right click would do a lot of bleed, but consume the Wrath. And the right click seemed to just say, hey, this enemy is going to die. So I was having fun with it, and then getting ready for podcast. I haven't actually played it much recently. Yeah. But ultimately, he's tanky. He hits stuff. He survives a lot of things. You do have to watch health potions some, but at the end of the day, he's solid. I mean, he wasn't terrible.
Barbarian was not the first class I played. Barb was just one of the extra ones I did after finishing my playthrough with the Sorcerer, which still isn't technically completely done, but I rolled credits, so I'm going to count it. And I went out of my way to make sure that I built them in whatever seemed to be the most unique way. So the Barbarian I'm building is the weapon swapping one, where you use all of the weapons you have available. The dual wielding, the blunt weapon, and the slashing 2-handed weapon. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty sick. And I haven't gotten that far in it, but it is really, really cool to play. And I actually think that version is going to give you the most legendary aspects, because it means that you have 4 in your weapon slots that you can put aspects on.
Yeah.
and then you've got all your
and you're
armor.
actually using them.
Yeah, and you're actually using them all. And so I think that's going to be a great build when it's finished. But that's where I'm at on the Barbarian. I think it's a really cool build. I played it in Diablo 3, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. With the Rogue, John started out as the Rogue.
I played as a rogue. I played it because similar reasons to Jeremy. I played summoners all the time and sorcerers and all my other action RPG experiences. I'm like, I'm going to try the rogue, and because I want to try something unique. And honestly, the character was very cool. Fucking, you can switch between blade. You have two blades, and you have a bow, and those are your weapons. And a lot of your skills switch between using either your blades or your bow. And I enjoy just the build I went for at first, which is the trap build. The rogue has access to a list of abilities they're called traps, such as caltrips that you throw on the ground that damage enemies, poison trap that you lay on the ground that can poison enemies when they step on it. Surprise, surprise. And one called the death trap, because for some reason the other ones don't cause death, despite the fact that they in fact do. But this one does more death. But also resets all your other abilities with cooldowns, so you can do more traps and more death. So I guess the name kind of fits. The character was quite enjoyable for the beginning part of the game, but the issue I started running into issues that with the the character, because it turns out that when your entire build's about laying traps, your weakness is guys who look at you and walk backwards while shooting. It turns out that they don't tend to walk into your traps when they walk away from you. And that honestly was a frustrating experience of being like, because any other action RPG, those guys tend to be the first to die. They're just squishy and they shoot you from range. You're like, easy XP. No, for me in this game, a little quill monster that goes, and then walks backwards and it does it again on repeat.
That's like a porcupine, an automatic porcupine is what it is.
Yeah, it is more dangerous to me than bosses in dungeons. Like an entire boss with a giant health bar, I can kill super quickly because it walks into my traps and I can just chain the traps because the build focuses on cooldown reduction. But it does. But if the moment there's a hamster with spikes on his back, God help me, please, I'm gonna die. Like
John and I talked about this one time when we were playing together, and I literally did not notice these enemies move backward until he mentioned it because my build didn't care.
Yeah, because he had a ranged attack that dealt tons of damage.
Well, I had a whip attack that's primary like enabler, but it didn't matter because once the build starts going off, there's lightning everywhere, so I just never encountered those guys.
Yep.
I only focused on the ones that were near me.
But I was hyper wary of which ones were the ranged ones and how they moved because it was important for my build. So for me, I got to experience something which we'll talk about later, which is the experience of like what happens, how the enemies level up with you, and that. Honestly, I'd experience dips in my build as I went. But the end of the day is I enjoyed the build, enjoyed the character for a bit. But honestly, I'm going to switch characters pretty quickly because I found that
Necro now, right?
I'm playing Necro now because honestly, like while the rogue is interesting, he does not really exciting to me. It's not as exciting as like I summon the dead. I cast a spell that makes people's blood explode out of their body. That's much more interesting to me than being like I fire a bow. But I mean, honestly, like it can be exciting, and I can see why someone would like it. But for me, even just from as Brian put it, the RPing aspect, I'm playing a game to experience this kind of like fantastical world. I want to summon monsters. I want to cause corpses to apparently explode, like with the Necromancer, and that's exciting to me more than using the rogue's other abilities, such as using a bow, turning invisible, dashing through enemies, and other aspects, which I did not cover. I'm honestly because I didn't touch.
There's so many skills. It's like there's no.
Honestly, my playthrough was my experience. There's a lot more to the character than I explained.
Yeah, I'll talk about what I did with the character. Back in here. What he means by RP is he means role play, like you being the character on the screen type thing.
Yeah.
My rogue was Wind Ranger from Dota 2. For anyone who's played Dota 2, Wind Ranger is an archer character who shoots in cones, straight lines and stuff. That's what I built, and then I put traps in there, and I just have a great time. I'm having an awesome time with the rogue.
Yeah, it turns out
I kill
range damage. You can kill range.
Sometimes I press R2 and I kill 7 enemies. Yeah, it's just the way it goes.
Yeah, man.
From distance. And what's cool is I have one of the abilities where if they're close, they get knocked back, and if they bounce into somebody else, they both get knocked down. Really cool ability. I'm having a good time with the rogue, and it's actually one of the classes I'm more excited to play. But I just play all kinds of builds, and I do the thing that John and Jeremy tried out this time, where I always try out something different. However, I usually don't regret it. I usually have a good time.
The bug was fine.
It always goes good for me. I think it's partly because I have played so the widest possible variety of games that you could play. So I'm not surprised when things turn out the way that they do. If the rogue is a sneaky crit build or whatever, I'm like, oh well, that's kind of whatever. It's fine. I like it. It's fun, and so it doesn't bother me. Because I've just played so many types of things in other games that I just don't care.
Well, just along the lines of just I focused on one build and I kind of got punished.
It didn't work. Yeah.
That's all it really comes down to, honestly.
Yeah.
You don't know ahead of time, but like I focused on traps and it turns out.
I wonder if you had gotten a legendary like I did that changed your idea of the build.
I've seen several legendaries and they just didn't really do much.
I was locked into it though because it was just the best staff I had.
Yeah.
And so I put it on and I was like, well, I could maximize my potential with this if I just changed my build a little bit.
Yeah.
Changed my build a little bit, actually ended up changing my build entirely.
So there is the respec system.
Yeah.
And that's getting rid of your skills, allocating those points and other things. So that's where you, like when I said, gee, I started this and I changed to that, I just paid some gold, got all my skill points back, tried Whirlwind, it was bad, spent more gold, did the bleed build, and then I was good. And at that point, I had like 8.5 million gold, so it didn't matter.
For me,
John had like
I
20,000.
I had 20,000, so I respec once, and I'm like, okay, let me try it. And I'm like, okay, so this build sucks. So I had to respec again, and I had no money.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
And then I experienced the fact that all the enemies in the game spec with you. So if your build isn't ideal or good, you can't go to a lower level area.
Yeah.
If you fought as a level 1 character, a squirrel, and it took 2 hits to kill, when you're like level 80 and you killed God with a blade of destruction, that same squirrel is going to take 2 hits to kill for some reason.
It's
So-
true for Diablo 3 as well.
Yeah, so the what he's talking about is I don't have the
3 ticks per zombie before you get into town.
I
It's
don't
3 ticks.
I don't have like a spreadsheet of data or anything, but it seems roughly that enemies get about 10% more health per level that you go up or per level they have, which means if you are not increasing your DPS by roughly 10% every time that you level up, you're gonna notice very quickly.
So it's one of the things where like the build didn't work out too well, and when I tried to respect, I somehow I'm like, okay, I'm gonna think this through, and then I went even deeper down in my hole, and the game's like, cool, now make money in order to refix this, and I'm like, I don't have money, I can't.
It's so it was when you told me that you had low money, I was actually surprised because I've heard this 50-50 on this issue from other people. I have never had problems with money, and I've re-rolled a lot. But I don't know what's happened. I'm at 11 million gold right now. And
Mr. Moneybags.
some people, it's not just you, but some people have trouble with gold. And some people, like 50-50, have no trouble with gold. And I don't know
might
what
be
the
the
decision
selling stuff.
selling versus trashing. I don't know.
It might be just.
Do you upgrade your weapons?
I do.
I
Jeremy doesn't.
didn't for a long time, but when I hit those bosses that I was struggling, then I would upgrade the gear.
Yeah.
I'd also swap out the gear that was shit.
Yep.
But
I do every single time I get a new legendary.
I had issues with money for the first little bit, and then at some point it was just, okay, I've gotten past the point where money matters as much.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go and buy a random piece of gear from a shop. So now I have all this gold that I'm just not doing anything with.
I bought random gear from shops all the time, and I still didn't have trouble. And I wonder if it's just because I play games with harder economies to deal with than this. I don't know. I don't know.
I literally.
Who knows?
There's so many micro decisions that you can make that can impact how much money that you have that I literally don't. I wouldn't be able to reproduce the steps to be short on money that somebody else did because there's some just
too amazing.
no.
Money. John the fool.
Well, there's some randomness to it because sometimes you just get higher value stuff to sell.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of things that go into it. The next build to talk about is Sorcerer. So far, I
Called a segue.
yeah, that's the segue. But I think I'm the only one here that's played the Sorcerer in this game so far. And I've played it in 2 separate ways. it has 3 primary builds. You've got the shock sorcery, flame, and ice. And the ice one had to get nerfed because apparently it was really busted. I only knew this through secondhand video content or whatever, because once again, I do everything guideless, and I've been having a good time doing it that way, so I'm going to keep doing it that way. My hardcore character is a flame sorcerer, and I really like where I think the build is going to end up. And then my favorite character to play so far, the one I keep playing because it's so much fun, is the shock sorcerer. I have a lightning whip effect that stuns things, and then I just start shocking everything. And my ultimate basically says every time I use a skill, because all my skills are shock skills, so every time I use a skill, including my basic one that is very fast, it casts a free spell. Every single time. So if I come across a group of like 5 elites, I'll ult, and the entire group will be dead in 2 seconds. And it is fantastic. I have never played a sorcerer in one of these games, so it was actually, that's not entirely true. In a Diablo game, I've never played a sorcerer before, and so I wanted to try it out because I was like, same thing as they did. I was like, oh, I've done barbarian, I've done this, I've done that, or whatever. But I just never got around to sorcerer, so why not get around to sorcerer right now? And I have been having literally the best time ever the whole time.
Brian actually had the action RPG experience. The fact that you press a button and an entire group of really powerful enemies dies, that's the draw.
It wasn't always like that, though.
Yeah, that's true. But that's the experience you want in an action RPG game. That's why I play PoE religiously for a long time.
Right, and that's the weird. There are some things that scale a lot better if you just have levels, and there's stuff that scales better with gear. Yeah. We experience that in PoE all the time. Is we pick the sorcerer because when you level up skill gems. And you just get tons of damage from the skill gem.
Yeah.
But then if you want to actually like push endgame content super far, you need actual good gear, which is expansive. And we don't have expansive stuff, so we don't tend to go 3, 4, 5 3, 4, 5 characters in like that. We just play like maybe 2.
Maybe 2.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's as much in Diablo 4. But there might be some aspect of that as well.
I haven't played enough to get to that.
The really good example of a character I believe who would scale better with items, because a lot of this stuff revolves around critting.
Yeah,
it revolves around basically hitting. Basically, when you crit, you multiply your damage by a huge amount, depending upon stuff. And the characters, the skill tree is full of stuff that's like, if you crit, this happens. If you do this, increase your crit. If you do like the character is like screaming, please let me crit.
Yeah.
And crit.
I think it wants to one-shot things. Is what it wants to do.
And the crit, what does crit rely on? It relies on base damage being good. And where's your damage come from? Well, your weapons.
Yeah.
Now, if you play other characters, like I'm looking at the Necromancer right now. That's the character I'm playing, which actually I can talk about now a little bit. I played a little bit, barely any at all.
Not quite. We'll get there in a second.
That's number 5.
We'll get there in a second, John.
We started then.
Let's talk about the pride and joy of the druid.
I do want to take 1 second. John and Jeremy are exactly right. Like, my build got way better when I got one piece of equipment and changed my whole build around it. I still have that same piece of equipment, even though I got it at level 55 and I'm level 61.
Yeah.
I just haven't changed it. And I found things that are, like, on paper have more DPS, but in practice have less DPS because I don't think the DPS calculation takes stun damage into effect. And my stun damage is where... It's where all of my damage is stun damage. Yeah. So I have been using the same thing for the last like 20 hours and having a great time with it. And honestly, it would take a really good piece of equipment for me to want to drop it. And I just haven't... Same exact everything, pretty much. At just higher base damage.
You can re-roll certain stats.
You can, however, I don't have the money and I don't have the crafting materials, and I also don't need to.
Yeah, and that's the... So, I mean, PoE always has the issue where your gear is good except for like 1 or 2 lines, and there's no good way of getting rid of those safely. Mm-hmm. Not going into that. But Diablo, you just go to an NPC, non-player character, non-playable character, whatever, and you're like, hey, reroll this stat line, here's infinite money, and your gear just gets better eventually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I haven't gotten to that part of the game yet, although I know that is what's going to cost 10 to 20 million gold. Well, I know this from talking to people.
I think it's more the crafting stuff is going to be hard because I think a lot of that is breaking down uniques.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Uniques are an entirely different thing, too. Which let's just not even talk about
No,
those.
I have
I
not.
found one piece of unique so far.
I have the Lilith one for.
I got that
completing
one through the
game.
quest, and then I found one on the ground.
Yeah.
But it was like useless to me. Actually, just it was a Frost Sorcerer build, and I wasn't going to change all of that. My Paragon board, which we'll talk about the Paragon board later, but my Paragon board, I'm locked in. Let's talk about the Druid. Jeremy played Druid in beta.
Yeah, I tried to push for level 25, and I just ran out of time because I think I started the second day of the beta. I got through effectively all of Act 1 with it, which is all that was released at the time.
No, I got to level 25 in 5 hours in the beta.
And it was long enough ago that I don't remember much, but I don't remember struggling as much as I think you have right now.
I'm not the only one that struggled with the Druid. If I've watched like Asmongold and a few other people, Crisparian, others talk about the Druid, people that I assume are just very good at these types of games.
Yep, I recognize the names.
And they just said Druid is the worst class objectively until level 70.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like that long. I'm not even in level 70 with my sorcery.
Oh my god, level 70? That's terrible.
And I noticed
That's roughly.
I noticed it immediately. So when I started out playing the game, I'd kill an enemy 3 hits, right?
Yeah.
Druid, it takes 5 for a regular mob enemy. And
I can't imagine starting that at the beginning of the game with resources.
And it's a lot of its skills are like it helps your armor and stuff like that, which is cool, but it doesn't help you kill things. And it feels like this class is the co-op class. Like this is the one that if you want to do like a party of PvP, you'll want a Druid in your pocket because they can buff everybody around them. And I think that we're going to see probably raid-style dungeons in this game at some point, and you're going to love Druids in those.
They have pseudo with the Gathering Legion events.
Sure, but I mean like a focus, because I would be shocked. Everything in this game really speaks to me that this wants to be an MMO light type game, which MMOs and live service games, there's a very thin line between them. So this is technically live service, but I think it's going to lean more on the MMO side. And the super late game content, which I'm going to mention this. I played 450 hours of Final Fantasy 14 and I did not get there yet. So the super, super late game content of an MMO, you have to play with people that have a variety of skill sets. And I think Druid is going to be that type of thing because it has painfully low DPS. But I'll tell you what, that if I was playing in a hardcore group or permadeath group, I would want somebody to be the Druid of the group. That way I could be the DPS or vice versa. It doesn't matter. I don't care what role I play. But somebody would need to be there to heal and produce armor for everybody. And that would be really nice.
It's a supporting class that helps everyone else do better.
Yeah.
And keeps them alive.
Yeah, and I will say that like the Druid, I'm excited to play more of it because it does have really good RP aspects. My Druid's going to start out as a poison werewolf, and then I'm going to turn into Toph from The Last Airbender. Except it's Finbor, the big fucking guy.
Finbor.
Finbor the Blind?
Yeah, I played with John when he was trying out Necro, and this is the best time to transfer into our Necromancer discussion here. And I had a great time playing co-op with John when I was playing the Druid. I did not have a fun time playing solo as the Druid.
Carry me.
This is where it kind of like, this is where my thoughts came from. I think that you really might want a co-op based Druid for like tier 50 co-op dungeons or something. I don't know. I don't know yet. But John has told me in the past, and I'm just going to mention this, and we'll get back to this later when we talk about Diablo 3, but he's done healing builds in MMOs or in Diablo before.
Not in Diablo, it was in Warframe.
Warframe, okay.
In Warframe, I would do a healing build.
I thought you did like a healing build in Diablo 3.
You did the chicken build.
Oh,
I did of course.
All right, we'll talk about the chicken build later. But Necromancer is the last class I tried out, and honestly, I think it's going to be one of my favorite ones. I'm doing a blood build, but I'll let John talk about that one.
Well, it's the Necromancer is the second character I'm going to play because I honestly got tired of dying to guys who have bows, so I was just like, I'm going to play something else. And the moment I opened up the skill tree of the Necromancer, I immediately got super excited because it was the RP aspect we talked about earlier legitimately the first ability is cause enemies' blood to explode out of them. I'm like, instantly like, this is my favorite character.
Yeah. That's the first thing that you see, and what's very interesting. Necromancer has a lot of different builds, and I think John and I were instantly attracted to the same build.
Yeah, which is corpse explosion, which is where when enemies die with that character, they actually, unlike other characters, there's actually a left behind sprite of like a pile of meat and bones, basically an indication that there's a body there. And the Necromancer can interact with that in multiple ways. And one of those skills is called Corpse Explosion, where you cause that pile of dead enemy to explode, dealing damage in a radius. Which, in previous games like PoE, I've enjoyed those kind of mechanics. And in this game, it's really fun because you press the button, it explodes, kills a pack of enemies, which leaves more meat piles to kill more enemies. And it's just like, oh, yes. The fact of the matter is, the Necromancer also has a skill that apparently decays an enemy and takes pieces of their body to make a new corpse.
Yeah.
In the middle of combat. So it's really important if you're trying to do something about corpse explosion and you're fighting, I don't know, a single enemy who won't die for about a while because it's a boss. So it's I don't know, I like looking at the character, just the RP aspect, as well as just the general like different skills were really exciting. Brian talked about the blood aspect.
Yeah.
Even to have some kind of like a blood mage kind of magic, which involves keeping yourself super healthy and dealing extra damage.
That's what attracted me to it, because as I went through all the other characters, I wanted a unique build from everything else I had done. Necromancer was the second to last one I built, so the Rogue was the very last one in the line. And when I got to the Necromancer, like, I'd done weapon swapping with Barbarian, which is high damage based stuff, and you know, using all of your tools available to you. I had done Sorcerer build, which is crit based, crit and stun based. Druid, I have no idea yet with the Druid, but I did the Druid.
Yeah.
And when I got to the Necro, I was like, well, what's the most unique thing I can find on this board? And what I saw was a build that you get benefited for being at max health or above max health. And I was like, I have literally never seen that in a game I've played before. I want to do that.
Yeah.
And I played a shit ton of games. So coming across a skill, a type of build that I've never seen before is very novel for me. And I almost dropped my Sorcerer right away because I was like, I want to really try that. Couldn't drop my Sorcerer, though, because I am a trophy whore, so I need all the trophies on PlayStation, and one of those requires level 100. It's more time efficient to finish that with the Sorcerer at this point. Mm-hmm. But I will say that, like, I stand by the statement that trophies, when they are good, improve your enjoyment of the game and make you want to play it more, and that is the case here. It made me try out every class. One of my main motivations for trying every class is because there's a trophy associated with it. And now I think I'm just going to go probably over the next 10 years max level with all of them, you know, because it was such a fun experience. And my last trophy is going to be the level 50 hardcore character, which I thought that this would be a good time to talk about permadeath in video games.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because hardcore basically means if you die, you lose your character.
It is that, exactly that.
Yeah. So how do we feel about hardcore or permadeath challenge modes in games?
I avoid them like the...
I have done it a couple times, and they always die.
For me, I like them as additional options that you have after
finishing the game. As an additional option.
I can see it,
yeah. It's a very good, like, do you actually know how to play the game, and are you good at it?
It's a nice way. I think it adds a lot of replay value because it adds a lot of challenge and risk to everything that you do. So you have to play the game in a different way than you normally would.
You do have to be very careful, especially with server-based games, because
the
first 99 character,
100
level 100 character that died in hardcore was just server lag.
Yep, it was a former StarCraft pro, and he lost his character to server lag. I think it was a server crash or something.
Okay, right? But it's still the server issue.
Yeah, it was a server-based issue.
Yeah, your computer could die, but that's your fault. That's your end.
If your computer died and this wasn't a live service game, it would
depend on how it.
It would depend on how it works, because they might build in a system that prevents you from cheesing it, that if you exit the game, it just kills the character. Like, that could happen, and that's a power issue. It's not a game issue at that point. Yeah. But for me, that's like, I want to put this off for a little bit until we're maybe a couple seasons in, That way, one, John and Jeremy can carry me to level 50, and then also so that those server issues are fixed, to be honest with you.
And sometimes that's just that initial player count. They never have enough servers for that first day.
Yeah, it's not in their benefit because to build servers to fit that many people would be disadvantaged.
Impossible.
Well,
How do you do like that's
Well,
really
you
impossible, I
rent
think.
servers from someone,
Yeah.
and you can set them up that way. But it's still, you don't want to rent for like a week.
You only need it for 2 days.
Right.
3 days.
Yeah.
After that, the player base immediately drops down to like the sustainable number.
Right.
Yeah. That makes sense. Because a lot of people will try out a game, realize they don't like it, and move on.
Yeah.
There are so many games.
I mean,
begging for
every
your
PoE
attention.
league, people come back to playing PoE because there's a new mechanic, new things to try. They'll play it for 2 weeks, either get bored of it, have done everything they want to do, and they'll say, okay, I'm out for 2 months, and I'll come back to the next league.
Yeah.
So you get that returning player too.
So that's cool. I think honestly, ARPGs are perfect for live service type stuff because they're really good at retaining people. Because to be quite frank, the abilities are fun to use, and I foresee myself playing this a lot. I wanted to have the platinum finished by the end of the summer, but to be honest with you, I don't want to rush through it. I kind of rushed through Zelda, and I don't regret that just because I play games, I finish them, I move on. Unless there's a trophy list. Trophy lists are what make me stay around for a game.
You are unique in that way.
I am. I'm not unique in that way, but I am a
friend
certain kind of player that likes that. Within our friend group.
Yeah.
I'm not really a completionist. If there's not trophies, I'm not completing it. That's just really the way it goes. Diablo 4 has trophies, so I'm going to be playing this probably for well over 100 hours. I'm 68 hours in, and I'm only level 61 with a sorcerer. So there's a long way to go, and I won't have it finished by the end of the year. But I personally don't care because there's going to be new content, so I'll just put it down and I'll start slowly working my way towards that trophy list as the new content rolls out. And I think that's perfectly going to be the best way for me to play this game. Some people have a lot of problem with like permadeath in games. I don't. Like I said, I think they're fine as an extra thing. What's different about permadeath in a game like this versus a roguelike is that the roguelikes are shorter.
That's what I was just thinking of.
Yeah.
I am a fan of roguelikes. I love roguelikes. They're one of my favorite genres of games. I eat them up. And I have no issue with dying in those games because in those games a playthrough is 20 minutes, 30 minutes, even an hour is fine.
And if it sucks really bad, it's 5 seconds.
And you go in understanding that there's a challenge to live as long as possible or to write a reason end. And there's an end state too. Like even if you like are trying to survive as long as possible, eventually you can just either beat the boss or die. But whenever you play a game like this versus Diablo hardcore, there is no end state.
These are games that intend to make you play them 100 hours.
Yeah. And I'm not excited by that aspect of playing 100 hours, getting a character built, and then them dying.
Now, counter argument, I played and beat all of Diablo 3 in like 6 hours. Yes, I died several times. And yes, that was my fault. And if I was better, you could get to level 60-ish in 6 hours.
Oh yeah, it's pretty possible.
And when you have something like that, it does make it a little bit. It takes the sting out of the first playthrough. Oh, I don't want to lose this guy because this is all new to me. But I popped open a build that just had infinite damage, and I threw the game.
Yeah, but that also was still 6 hours.
It is.
And
this game is not designed, I don't think, for that type of 6-hour thing. Because I don't know how you would grind levels quickly in this game, to be honest with you.
Well, levels don't matter in this game. Everything scales with you.
Well, no. Diablo 2 or Diablo 3 is the same.
Yeah.
It does scale with you.
It's just very
but their scaling makes it a lot easier. Diablo 4 was a lot harder for you to scale up your game.
I think Diablo 3 was just like, it was built for an audience that just wants to rip through things with very little. I don't have a very high opinion of Diablo 3, so we'll get there when we get there.
There's an achievement for beating an act in an hour.
Yeah. So, I really like this type of stuff, and I actually like. If the game is good and it's built in such a way where the permadeath isn't like bullshit, stupid hard, or like unfair. Unfair is the word I'm going to use.
Yeah.
I actually like it when there's a trophy for permadeath. I think it's cool. There's one in Alien Isolation I really want to get sometime where you have to beat the game without
That
dying.
actually sounds exciting,
Yeah.
honestly.
And then there's one in Wolfenstein 2 where you have to beat the hardest difficulty without dying. I like these types of things because they require you. These are the perfect type of trophies that sometimes prevent me from getting a platinum, but it's not like the platinums or the final trophy where it's like, oh, you need to have played this at the optimal time when it was online to get the trophy, or you need to have played this 1,000 hours to get it. No, these types of things, some people will get right the first time, and it's all skill based. That's when I like these types of things.
Yeah. It's just it gives you a reason to play the game differently and have a different experience, and that's exciting.
Now, for people who haven't played this, but you're familiar with other games that have it, like XCOM, Darkest Dungeon, Fire Emblem,
Played all of them.
those I have too. I think that might be part of why I'm okay with permadeath, because in those games, it's just a part of the game, and and sometimes you will lose a guy that you grinded up for 30 hours.
Well, for XCOM and Darkest Dungeon, I like it better because the characters are more throwaway. In Fire Emblem, they are very specific people. Really, you can just throw away certain characters, but like there are some that you don't want to lose.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to do that save scum perfectionist, I'm not going to lose anyone, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Darkest Dungeon,
Their nameless, effectively.
Yes, you can name them, and I had sent off
when I replay it, I will name them.
Yes,
That's for sure.
I sent off a college friend off into the woods with 3 new recruits. They all came back super messed up, and I sent those 3 new recruits plus a 4th one into the Darkest Dungeon for an achievement.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I like these types of things. As just an aside here, I love games that do this where you can make the characters and then there's permadeath. I have so many great stories of XCOM and
Cult of the Lamb.
It makes it more impactful.
Yeah.
It makes it more. I have not played Cult of the Lamb yet.
Yes.
I need to.
It's so much fun.
My first playthrough of XCOM 2, I did the Power Ranger squad, and John was my Pink Ranger. John actually survived to the end of the game. Ryan, who was on the last episode, he was the Blue Ranger, and I was the Red Ranger. And then I was running short of people, so I put John's sisters in the game, and they died. They died. John lived. I actually, as a fun little story...
So add real quick, the fact that permadeath makes admittedly, when I play XCOM Dark Dungeon, I can't plan. I
get too attached to the
I get too attached, and when they die, I immediately, the fact that I observe all my effort that goes down the drain, and I immediately am so downtrodden that I'm like, I'm not playing this.
Oh.
But admittedly, listening to you guys talk about this stuff, there is stories that this generates.
Stories are great.
Because
it's the RP.
It's the RP aspect. It's the character had a story, and they died, and you have a sometimes funny, sometimes horrible story.
Sometimes harrowing,
and it means something, as opposed to other games where like they die, and then they after the boss ends, they get back, brush off the dust, and okay, time to go.
Yeah, and that's why XCOM and Darkest Dungeon, you just get more and more characters, and there's no real fail state. Fire Emblem, if enough people die, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, you actually just can't.
Well, XCOM, you can't just lose them.
You can,
but that's from other fail states.
Yeah,
but those fail states are sometimes perpetuated by you losing characters.
Yes,
so
I agree.
yeah, so those
at least in its dungeon, you can't soft lock.
I haven't played it far enough to know that, but you can.
You can.
Okay.
As long as you have, you can send I think one person into a dungeon.
Okay.
So you can always. The fail state would be you don't have enough money to recruit new people, and you can't get enough money through a dungeon run to do anything.
Okay.
But
so true. Technically, you could.
Yeah, I guess if you have no people and no money, but you have to go very wrong for that.
Okay.
No bitches and no riches.
I just really like the story generation. I know between my XCOM 1 and 2 playthroughs, I continued the chronology of it. So our friend Cole died and my brother died in my first play, and Alex died in my first game. And so when I went into the next game, my avatar character, he had scars left over from the first game that I put on him, and his brother was not there. And it created an entirely different story thing where the people who were alive from the first game were in the second one, and I just let them die if they didn't make it, because it made the stakes more and it made the story more. I like writing stories, and that made me feel like I was writing a story. And that's why I kind of like permadeath challenges after you finish the game. So when I have maxed all characters in Diablo 4, I will probably only play the game hardcore because I like the RP of this. If this character dies, that was their life. They're over. And I like the fact that you can make characters like that and you can really roleplay them like that. I like that it's an option, and I also like that it's not forced in this game.
I can see it as a draw, yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I think, what makes this game. If I didn't have a backlog that was 500 games long, this is the game I think I'd be playing all the time.
I would love to have this game in high school if I was a kid. Or
Yeah,
college.
this honestly would have been one of the best games to have in high school. I would have preferred this over
All
Skyrim, maybe.
the games that have come out this year have been like, this would have been amazing in high
Yeah,
school.
wouldn't this have been an amazing year to be a child?
It would be an amazing year.
Assuming that your parents got the game for you.
Yeah. One of these games would be like, well, here's infinite content and amazing content.
I'll tell you what, like from this year, I played maybe 200 hours of Mortal Kombat Deception. If Mortal Kombat 1 came out when I was a kid, like that's what I played.
Yeah.
Or Diablo 4 or anything. Like you're right. I just think we're in one of the best years of gaming ever that has ever happened.
Why is this not the first time this has come up today?
Yeah, I think this is just the best gaming year that I have ever lived through in 28 years.
Your third bullet lived through life.
Yeah.
How many lives have you had?
28 years of games. So, and that is going to be the entire topic of discussion at the end of July when we talk about what we think is going to be game of the year at the end of the year, just as a halfway check. Right. And there's going to be some notable games gone that we can't talk about, like Armored Core 6, but we'll be able to talk about, I think, what is most of the biggest releases of the year. I want us to go back in time a second here, and
Back to baby Blizzard.
we're going to go back to 1997. I told you we were going to come back to 1997. 90s are back. Diablo, that's when the Diablo franchise
I have a
started.
fun fact about Diablo 1.
What?
I told John this already. Who made Diablo 1?
I have no idea.
Blizzard North, which was actually a completely independent studio, and he was struggling to get a publisher, so he contacted Blizzard, and they basically just bought up him.
Really? Mm-hmm. That's awesome, man. And it ended up creating probably one of Blizzard's like biggest franchises.
It
like,
did.
Most important ones.
Yeah.
It's a very different game. It's not a loot grinding game. Not really.
That's all I know.
I'm the only one I've played. It's more like an adventure, like an isometric adventure action game. Really, like you do get loot, yeah, but the gameplay loop is not redoing stuff to get loot. It's get to the bottom, beat Diablo.
Oh, so it's a proper RPG game.
It is the first action, what we would later call the ARPG genre.
So it was leaning towards it at the time.
The sequel is where ARPG as we know it, the Diablo clone or the Diablo genre starts. 2000. That's the year 2000. 3 years later, they have sprite-based graphics. Diablo 1 is where I started in the franchise, and then I would go to Diablo 3 and then 2. Back to 2.
Okay.
2 got a remake recently, so if you want to check out 2, you can. I love the look of like sprite-based games, and that was the main reason I played them. It's the main reason I like them. But to be honest with you, I get painfully bored near the end of these experiences, and I fall off pretty quick. D2 had a lot of mechanics that I'm glad are not back in D4, even though Diablo 4 has taken the like graphical style and art direction of 2 in the modern era. I'm glad that they don't have limited sprints. That weapon and armor durability really only happens if you die. Before you would have to come back and repair it constantly.
Yeah.
And I also, this mechanic, I understand why Diablo 2 did it. Diablo 2 was the first of its genre. I'm going to give it some grace for that. But when you die in Diablo 2, you drop all of your equipment.
It's just like Minecraft.
Yeah. And
Die then!
while that might be fine in Minecraft,
No, it's not.
I don't know.
Every time I die in Minecraft, it
Don't worry,
feels
we'll
so-
get you a Minecraft server for all of your subscribers.
Well, at least you didn't grind 5 hours for a piece of equipment and then drop it.
That would make it worse.
Yeah.
Well, I actually know it had to happen in
You did?
Minecraft.
Okay.
Yeah, you enchant armor with like 5 different things. Like, this is the best armor I ever made. I had to build a mob farm, an enchanting area, farm hundreds of lapis, and you're like, I got all this stuff. And then you die to one thing and you lose it all, and you're like, I'm done playing.
Yeah. Yeah, but
So I can see why. You're like, fuck this.
currently Diablo 1 and 2 are in my top 100 of the 90s and 2000s, but I don't think they'll be there by the time I played everything I want to be. I want to get through, and it's just because I think I actually like Diablo 1 more just because it's more like it's just a hard action RPG and it's not based on like the loot grind and you reach the credits, you're done.
Yeah.
Whereas D2 is supposed to like you're supposed to loot grind, you're supposed to play it forever, and I just don't really like that kind of stuff, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And the only reason that it
Which
seems
is probably why you didn't like Diablo 3 too much then.
Diablo 3 is the next one we got to talk about. I got 30 hours and got bored, reached level 70, stopped playing the game. I had a Beyblading Barbarian, and I just stopped playing once I got bored. And I was gonna go for the platinum, but I was so bored after my first playthrough. I was like, I cannot do this with every other character.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Diablo 4 has fixed every issue I've had with previous like ARPGs. I never got to the Diablo 3 in game, but a lot of people are really concerned about the Diablo 4 in game and like, is it going to be as good as ARPGs are supposed to be? And I really can't comment on that, but Jeremy and John can both.
Well, I have a question. What do you consider endgame?
The stuff you do after you max level.
Okay.
Oh, max level.
Well, so Diablo 3, I literally sped run it and got 2 of the 5 achievements for beating an act in under an hour. You can definitely do that pretty quick. The endgame content that I was doing for like 20 minutes was just going to an old area, being told, hey, kill this thing or go here and interact with this. So it gave me like little micro goals of like, hey, do this small task and then you can leave. Or if you want to stick around, you can. And if you do all the micro goals in an act, you would get some actual like more tangible reward. And what I saw a lot of it was
wasn't there like Nephilims or something like that?
Nephilims.
Nephilim.
Yeah.
Well, your character is Nephilim.
Yes.
There's Nephilim orbs, which was fun. But
Wasn't there like Nephilim dungeons or something?
yeah, that's the actual in-game stuff.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That's all I did was that for like 20 minutes.
I did Nephilim dungeon stuff.
I didn't do any of the rifts.
The rifts.
I heard a little bit about what they're like, not from John, but the end game content that I did was just go to a place, interact with a little bit of mechanic, then go somewhere else. So it keeps it varied instead of just, oh, I'm wandering through the forest. Oh, I'm wandering through a graveyard. Oh, I'm wandering through a battlefield. It mixed it up a lot. And the rewards were, I think, crafting recipes for uniques and legendary gear. So you could start to actually like hone in your build very specifically.
That's something I liked about Diablo 3 in comparison to other action RPG games, is that Diablo 3 gave you ways in which you could generate and craft legendary items, and you can actually acquire basically all of them feasibly. Mm-hmm. Unlike other games I've played, like Pee-wee's often one I've played, where I've played for so long and I have not gotten even close to getting a headhunter or even touching it. It's always been something that I'm like, that looks nice, sitting in my squalor.
Well, with the Nephilim dungeons, like, I didn't get to that part of the game. What's that like?
So it's basically you enter an area. You enter a this portal area that's in the main town. And they're like, "How hard do you want it to be?" And you're like, "I don't want it to be this hard." And then you enter it, and then you have to basically rush through. And I think it basically gives you a task to fill up a bar, and you fill the bar by killing enemies. And once you fill up the bar, the boss spawns, and your goal is to kill that boss. And there's actually a timer. There'll be a bar that you can fill up, and there's a timer that slowly goes across the bar that tells you how much time you have. And your goal is to actually fill up the bar and kill the boss before the timer reaches the end of the bar.
Okay.
So
If you do that, you get more rewards. And the rewards in that game is you get better rewards from killing the boss. They tend to drop tons of legendary gear. You get the usual action RPG thing of like dopamine because 5 billion legendaries or stuff falls all over, and you're like, colors, which is always
I call those diarrhea Christmas lights.
Yeah, basically. I mean, honestly, yeah, because the enemy dies, and there's. But then there's the aspect of like you can upgrade gems in that game, which go infinitely, and those gems can be slotted into your gear. And those gems, for example, my favorite ones, which was really nice, it was a gem that if you upgraded enough, well, every time you upgrade, it increased the amount of experience you gained. And if you got to level 70, it would then made it so any item you equip it to has a level requirement of 1. Mm-hmm. So I would equip it to a sword that says deal aura damage to all nearby undead. Mm-hmm. that was a level 68 sword that dealt 3,000 damage per second. I would equip that to a new character, walk into a...
Well, you would start a new game on high difficulty, and you would just melt stuff.
You'd walk into not like in-game, but like mid-tier area, and your character go from like level 1 to like level 20 instantly, because like 30 skeletons are like, you can't be here, and then instantly disintegrate because you walked forward, and then you just like... And then the gym multiplied your experience, so your character went 20.
So you could level quickly.
And oh god, it was so satisfying. Mm-hmm. But for me, the in-game content in Diablo 3 was really enjoyable, and it's where it kind of really drew me to the action RPG experience. I had, what Jeremy mentioned earlier, the experience of having the chicken build with the Witch Doctor, which the Witch Doctor has a skill that says, turn target enemy into an animal. There was a specific item that if you equipped it, or at least 2 items in this case, once you equip both of them, it allowed you to turn yourself into a chicken. You gained 2,000% increased movement speed and the ability to activate the skill again to explode the chicken, dealing massive amounts of damage. And it was so satisfying to travel and do those quests Jeremy was talking about. I would enter an area, I see which quests need to be done. I'd enter that area and then just turn into a chicken and sprint at the speed of God straight towards the nearest enemy, and then explode into a confetti of Death's Breath, which is the crafting material, picked it up, transformed it into chicken, and continue on. And God, my college me was like dopamine out the walls. It was like, oh my God, being a chicken is the best. So
yeah,
it was...
I would pay for somebody to Photoshop you as a chicken now.
Yeah, I mean, awesome. For me, it was an action RPG. That's where it really drew me into the action RPG thing. I wallowed in that experience. I really fucking enjoyed it. I know you got bored of it, and you.
I did. And
I ate that up.
It's not the only RPG that had that effect on me.
Yeah.
When I say Diablo 4 is the only one that I have not gotten bored of in 60 hours, that's true because I've never played one of them 60 hours long.
If Brian lies, it is a surprise, but he's telling the truth.
Yeah. But I played a lot of these. I played Diablo 1, 2, 3, Titan Quest, Torchlight, Grim Dawn, and Grim Dawn. Those are the ones that are very much like ARPG in the same way that Diablo's an ARPG. My Titan Quest time, which was the Greek-inspired one, not very good. I had like a lifesteal build, and then they have a mechanic where if the enemy is a skeleton, you can't lifesteal from them. So my build just doesn't work. And I'm like, why is this a build? And I like in Diablo 4 how that's not possible.
It's the flavor.
Yeah, that's not possible. Torchlight, I just got bored of. It was only 10 hours to finish the game, fortunately, but I got bored of that one too. And then Grim Dawn, at that point, it was like after Diablo 3, and so I played like maybe an hour and got bored.
Grim Dawn, I had so much fun with, because in Grim Dawn, there was a kind of witch doctor-like character, and they have a weird set of skills. But all I know is I had the skill to give enemies the plague. You'd shoot a skill, it hit an enemy, and if any nearby enemies were near it, it would actually spread the plague further. So you could spread it through packs of enemies, big groups of enemies. And the fun thing is, it would spread so fast, it would spread several screens in. The interesting thing is, you had the choice to upgrade the skill so it would deal more damage. But the drawback is, it would make enemies faster and hit faster.
Okay.
So what my experience with that game was, is I'd walk into a forest and be like, I spy an enemy! And I'd launch a little ball, it'd float in, it would hit them, and then all enemies for 2 screens over would get aggroed and sprint at me at high speed. And my job was to then run away like a little bitch screaming, or being punched to death by wild bears and demons who were enraged and punching me at the speed of sound in the ass as I ran. And I'm just like, as 3 packs of enemies are literally just punching me in the ass until they die. It was the most fun experience ever because of that experience, because it was so wacky of just being like, Hadouken! And then every enemy is just like, that man, dead now, and they teleport to me.
To be fair, when I play Street Fighter and somebody Hadoukens, I killed them too. So. To be fair, I think that's just the Hadouken effect.
But if you got the common cold and then you gain the power of like 10 men and the power to run the speed of Usain Bolt, and you're just like, fucking kill that guy.
God, I feel like this world would have been just full of Supermans during COVID then. So
the economy would have boosted.
Yeah. So I got into trying out ARPGs because of John talking about Diablo 3 and my memories of Diablo 1. There are a couple other games that were like, they tried to be like Diablo 1, very early on before Diablo took off, and that was like Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. I actually like that era. I like that era a lot. Every single one of the games I've played that tries to be more like Diablo 1, I love.
I actually want to play some games like that. I want to play Divinity of Sin with you guys at some point.
Yeah.
Divinity Sin 2,
Oh, that would
Baldur's
be
Gate.
that would honestly be a really fun thing to do on the channel sometime. A Divinity 1 and 2 playthrough. I think that would be a lot of fun.
I would do that.
Yeah, we should. I'll put it in the pipeline. That'd be fun to do sometime. It can't be this year because this year's focused on trying to play.
6 months later.
I want this year to be my year where I play brand new games. Is the things, right? So
What,
that's
there's good games coming out or something.
mainly because I want to play. Well, yeah, this is the best year of games, but also it just has things I really want. Like I've been waiting for an Armored Core game for a long ass time. I've been waiting for Final Fantasy to be back for a long time. I've been waiting 4 years for Mortal Kombat, and they're all coming at the same time.
You start like pushing for like world peace.
Yeah, I don't.
Something because
I
apparently
think
the world's
Something useful.
That's something.
I think I'm just the target demographic for every game company.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Well, I think I've just
We want more of this. It's just a close up of your face. I'm like,
I've played so many games in my life that I think I just get very lucky, and that game studios just end up making what I want.
Yeah, I fully understand
You know,
but it's just
so-
amazing how much. I think you did this last year. We're like, I really want this game, and then it freaking came out.
Yeah.
Okay, I really want this game, and then it came
Well,
out.
I
and
mean,
it's happening.
This is
year.
this is before we talk about Zelda getting a new one, Resident Evil 4 being back, and Dead Space getting remade too. So, like, I mean, this year is just. I think this year is gonna go down as the best year of gaming because it comes from a period of time where AAA games have just been trash for the last couple of years.
Yeah, true.
And if you look at like top 10 games of 2020, 2021, 22, you're going to see a lot of indie games, which is great because indie games are awesome. I think this time indie games are probably not going to hit the top 10 because there are just so many. There are. We'll talk about some that I've come across that are really cool.
If Silk Song comes out, maybe.
I think that's
Maybe Silksong, but I don't think it's coming out this year.
I
So-
said it was quarter 4.
Maybe.
Quarter 4 usually means quarter 1 of next year.
Yeah.
It includes quarter 1 of next year at the end of that.
Well,
But,
usually it gets pushed back.
yeah.
They target that like Christmas Christmas time frame,
Mhm.
and then it's the crunch at the end. And
Yeah. And it's just like John was saying, there's too many games to play. Like they're all long games, too. They're not short.
Yeah.
And they're all high caliber. I really like the Armored Core 6 is going to be like a 10-hour game. To be honest with you, that's going to be a nice palate cleanser after Final Fantasy 16 and everything. And Diablo 4, and I'm going to be playing Diablo 4 a long time. And that's before we talk about Street Fighter 6 is already out.
PoE 2 is going to be.
PoE 2 is probably
Does it
coming
have a
out
date?
next year.
We have
I think
no idea.
Probably next year is
Okay.
the estimate.
Yeah.
And then also Tekken 8 is going to come out later. Like I like
Ooh,
fighting games.
we
and
hold
so
him hostage for PoE 2 and we force him to stream it.
There you go.
I would actually stream PoE 2. I have a planned series for next year, which is the entire Yakuza franchise.
Yeah, no.
But
when
I'll
PoE
take
comes
a-
out, we'll just
I'll take a break. I'll take a break and
Oh,
play
okay.
PoE 2 in the middle
PoE
because
2 is part of the Yakuza storyline.
well,
Yeah.
I'm a-
Yakuza's, and then this is Big Yakuza PoE.
play a variety of games because I that's my way of avoiding burnout. I have a system where I play 3 games at one time and I just rotate between them to avoid burnout.
Which would
I have a
explain
game
why
I
you're such a fast pace with that.
I have a game I stream, a game I play on my own, and a game on my Switch. So I rotate between them, and it's a very efficient system for getting through the backlog, and it also allows me to play a variety of things. So
I need to do that.
I sometimes need a break from a franchise. So when I do the Year of Yakuza next year, I probably will need a break in the middle. I'll do PoE 2 for that. That'll be fine.
Yeah.
PoE is the standard of ARPG according to all the other people I've watched, like Asmongold, Crisparian, everybody else I watched says PoE 2 is or PoE
The
is
original one
is the best ARPG game ever made.
is amazing.
We've already kind of talked about our experiences with other ARPG games. I have never played PoE, so I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to let Jeremy and John kind of gush about this title.
So step number 1 is open up google.com and search PoE skill tree and then cry.
I do have a comment here. When I saw the PoE skill tree when the game was announced, John and I had actually talked about it. because I was considering playing it at the time.
Yeah.
Back in like 2012 when it was announced or something like that. I don't remember
Yeah. I don't
the
remember.
exact time. But I remember my first thought when I saw the skill tree is like, this is just like Final Fantasy X's skill tree, which it's not actually like that. But that was my first thought. And I just wanted to say that.
It's kind of a joke. The big thing with that skill tree is that of these 7 starting classes, they're all on that same skill tree. And you can go from the right-hand side, which is like the witch or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Honestly, it's
You can go from any starting point and you can build all the way to the other side of the tree and have like a character that's normally focused on intelligence, build a strength dex hybrid for reasons.
Yeah.
The systems behind the game are deep and complicated. It's sometimes hard to get into.
Oh, it's very hard to get into.
Min-max is impossible for most people, but the reward for playing the game is you can do some of the most insane things. Simple version, you can summon an army of skeletons and zombies, and I was going to say a reaper, but you can't have that at the same time. It'll eat your other stuff.
A skull. You can summon skulls while you're temporary flaming skulls that attack your enemies. Basically, think of
Necromancy.
Dooms.
Or yeah.
The Lost Souls.
You had summoned Lost
Hey,
Souls.
I can participate in the discussion. I know Doom.
Yeah.
I know Doom very well.
There you go.
Then you can go a step up and just be a guy on fire.
There's a skill that consumes you alive to 1 HP, and it builds around trying to mitigate that, so you can have that flame around you at all times. Mm-hmm. And since it's based off your max HP, as long as you're a big beefy man, everything around you just burns in the righteous fire.
Yes. You go and you do a cyclone build where you're spinning and you have a cast on channel skill gem. While you're spinning, you're channeling it, which means that you're triggering whatever you have attached. And that could be lightning for your Mjolnir build. Literally so much fun. You actually have a unique item called Mjolnir, and it spins and it just shocks.
What a great word, Mjolnir.
Yes.
I love the way it's spelled. I love
you mean meow meow.
Meow meow?
Yeah, great meow meow.
Oh, God.
And then you can take that a step farther and do John's stupid build that he only got because he got lucky.
Yeah, I got lucky because I sell something for 26 Divine, which is currency in the game. And in this game, you're allowed to trade with other players, which is honestly kind of necessary, it feels, because
100%.
The game is full.
There is a mode where you don't have to.
There's a
Don't do it. Don't do it.
There's a huge amount of items in the game, and the drop rate in this game is very, very low for a lot of items, and it requires a lot of effort. And as a result, a lot of builds would be impossible without obscene amounts of real-time effort, unless you can basically buy from other players or sell to other players. And in my case, I was able to build a build that was utilizing a ability to self-damage for I think 200 damage per second, which was then mitigated by another item that let me mitigate more than 200 damage per hit. But that worked because there's a skill gem, which we need to talk about, that says every time you take damage, cast a certain amount of damage, cast a skill gem. And as a result, my build was able to cast 6 cold spells every 0.2 seconds. It was literally the limitation. The limitation of the build was how many server ticks there were.
I thought my build dealt damage. We got into a late game thing where you're fighting 5 armies.
5 armies.
4 or 5 armies. And I'm killing stuff and I feel good. And then John just zips around and everything dies. And I'm like, I'm glad I'm present.
I fought one of the final bosses of the game called Cirrus, and he wasn't even able to. He has an ability that says he makes a maze underneath him, teleports you to the maze, and says you must get out of the maze within a certain amount of time, or he instantly kills you. And he does that. Well, at least he tries to. I'm not sure how much damage he deals, but it's such an absurd amount. It basically guaranteed kills you. I dealt so much damage. He didn't get a chance to cast that once.
Yeah,
I just
he
melted
has
him.
different phases, and John insta-phased with this build.
So
the ceiling to this game is unimagineable.
It's absurdly high.
The floor can sometimes be a little too high.
Yep.
And I think we're going to force you to pick a build and go for it.
PoE is on my list of MMOs when I do that series. It's on the list, and I will take a break for PoE too. But I won't. I know for sure I won't have time this year for PoE.
That's fine. But I mean, we might say, okay, for the first little bit, do whatever, explore. But at some point, you're probably just going to...
Oh, I'm going to play it. I'm going to play it for sure, and I wouldn't have done that without Diablo 4. Mm-hmm. Diablo 4 just kind of busted open the gates for me, I think.
Yeah.
A little bit.
So, let's just go into the main reason PoE is extremely exciting for a lot of people. PoE has the giant skill tree that gives you immense amounts of options for builds. Mm-hmm. And the second thing that's really what main focus of this game is the gems. In this game, the skill gems are your skills are not attached to your character. They're actually attached to physical items that you are able to then slot into your armor, and those skills can those that your character can then cast. So the limitation you have is basically how many skill slots that in your items you have is how many skills you can have. So, and the fun thing that makes this game really exciting though is that there's gems that they're called support gems that modify what those skills do. And as long as they are slotted in and attached to a compatible skill, that skill now has an extra effect, like it attacks twice, or it has spell echo, so it casts twice, or it has wider area of effect, or it has faster projectiles or slower projectiles. And often the case, a lot of people just pick, of course, because this is an action RPG game, stuff that increases your damage. But what me and Jeremy were talking about were builds that would do things like use an ability. This would have a support gem that says cast on something, and they would automatically for you cast other skill gems attached to it. And the amount of build variety as a result of this system they have in place is absurd. And as a result, people can make the sheer amount of choices you have available to you is obscene, and it's so fun to play and think of the possibilities. And as a result, the game has almost infinite replayability.
And I think the other major thing, and this is really answering the question of the end game loop, is every league comes with new content, comes with new final bosses, new things to explore, and sometimes the league will come into the core pool of stuff.
Yep.
There are certain league aspects that were so good that people wanted them to come back, and the developers said yes. And that lets you say that this final boss, Cirrus, he came from leagues ago. He's still there. He drops special support gems.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a temple. You can go into that temple, and as you're playing, you upgrade the temple. And at a certain point, you can take a skill gem and you can put it in the machine, and it will corrupt the skill gem. Sometimes it destroys it, I think.
Yep.
Sometimes it will reset its entire progress. Sometimes it'll change it to another. And sometimes it will give it an extra level that's not normally reachable. And you can do this. There's I think we listed off 8 different just content-based stuff that all has their own crafting stuff, their own currencies, their own bosses.
The moment you beat the game, once you beat the campaign, you are out of content. You actually have entered
that's when the game starts.
The game effectively starts, and the sheer amount of content is absurd, and it's all tied into their mapping system that lets you basically
has a second skill tree attached,
which has its own skill tree
that you can start to, as you complete maps, you get points, and you can start to focus your content in. Okay, there's specific content that John doesn't like to do, so he can put points in places and get rid of it.
Yeah, don't have to worry about it anymore.
There are some content that I like to do, and John will feed me currency for, and I will go towards those in the skill tree to do specific content. And there's 12 leagues or something with its own content, with its own stuff, and you can just pick which ones you want to interact with, and you can go as far in those as you want.
I haven't played PoE, so this could be a completely incorrect comparison. But when you guys talk about the wideness of the board, it kind of reminds me of the Paragon boards from Diablo IV a little bit.
That would be the Atlas passive tree, which is the skill tree for the mapping. It's not when you level up you get the points. It's when you complete a new map it will unlock, and you have to. Some maps require specific things.
They require certain difficulty
the
increase.
tier of the map.
Yeah.
But it gives you a point, and honestly, PoE has a bunch of garbage skill points, like the 5 stats.
Yeah.
Those don't really feel as good in PoE.
But when you reach the big nodes, it's so satisfying.
But there was a node that says, hey, I'm literally trying to think of one.
Every single map contains a strong box, which is basically just a chest that explodes into items.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Kind of like those chests in Diablo 4 that you have to do the little challenge for.
Yeah.
No, this is just a chest.
But kind of like that, it explodes into a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can get more that says, hey, this chest is going to contain this type of thing.
Yeah, you can start making so they have different item choices. You can get ones that have a chance of dropping mapping items. You have ones that increase that drop more currency. You can there's a node that says they drop double the currency, which is absurd. So it's just stuff like that, which it's exciting. It draws you to do more and more and more, and that's where this loop comes in, where you're just like, I want to do this, do more mapping, get more items. More mapping means more content. More content means I can have more better, different builds. More, it keeps going.
I think the biggest part about it is if you sat down, start of a league, and you said, "This is my checklist of all the things I'm going to do for this league." Once you hit mapping, that checklist starts. And that checklist probably has 20, 30, 40 things.
Yeah.
How big is your checklist for Diablo 3? Or sorry, Diablo 4?
Well, my checklist is the platinum, so it's pretty big.
But what's on that list?
Get to level 100, which is pretty lengthy. Get to level 50 on hardcore. Beat Uber Lilith. Do, what was it? 10 ancestral dungeons. Do get 10 chests from the Tree of Whispers, which these are a lot. Diablo 4 is a big game, and there's so many mechanics we didn't even discuss that well, like Paragon board, like the Paragon board, and the Whispers system is insane. We'll maybe dive a little bit more into the late game stuff as we all get there by the next episode or something. Mm-hmm. But it's like 5 things that I'm trying to do.
Our list for PoE is like 20, and that's just, I want to get to this boss and fight this boss.
Just to get to the boss. Now, the difference is, and Diablo 4 will have this, PoE's been out for a long time, and they've been doing what Jeremy described, where they keep tying in more content they generated back into the core game, which is why they have so much shit. Diablo 4, hopefully, over, as Ryan said,
they have 10 years.
Over the next 10 years, that, let's say for Diablo 4, the next 10 years, they will probably, as they add more content, be able to generate, and that's probably going to be their goal. A lot of DLC tends to be targeted towards players who are...
I think that's why it's such a slow grind to 100. Like, you get to 50, I think, pretty quickly.
Yeah.
50 is not that bad to get
First time probably takes a lot longer.
Yeah,
Second time it'll probably be real quick.
50, like, I felt like, oh, this is pretty good, and then 50 opens up the Paragon boards, and then that's where your build really gets focused and you get a lot of cool stuff. Like I recently got one where if I stun an enemy near me, I get 10 mana back, which basically means infinite mana. Yeah. And so I really liked that system, and I'm really excited. I have like 2 boards attached to each other. Can't wait to spread that out even more, to be honest with you. And I haven't even gotten to the part where you have to start grinding up your the relics that you put into the board for bonuses.
I'm excited about playing that. Like, that's why I want to get into my Necromancer character, because I'm honestly tired of playing a rogue. I've had too many bad experiences. I want to play Necromancer. I want to have exploding bodies everywhere, and then I want to try to get into that stuff.
I want to play the Crusader because I like Paladin. Paladins are probably my favorite types of things to play in like isometric type stuff. When I played Final Fantasy 14, the Paladin was one of my favorite things to play. I like that type of thing. I was kind of sad it wasn't here, but I also don't mind that they rotate things out that you first have access to, and that they'll add the Paladin later. Yeah. It'll happen.
It's very likely, yeah.
I think it just comes down to that point, though, that you made, John, of the 10 years of content makes it so much easier to have an end game that has diverse content and satisfying rewards. Well, I think Diablo 4 has some satisfying rewards, but I'm not sure if it has
the content to get you there.
It's
that's true of like if it weren't for this year being the year that I'm trying to build up content on the channel and playing brand new stuff, I wouldn't have played this for a couple years, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because you would have waited for the DLC.
I would have waited until DLC came out and it was cheaper to buy. To be honest with you.
Yeah, I remember you making the decision process too, because that was your exact argument.
It's just the channel. It's the channel, and if it weren't for me wanting to build up the channel and me to talk about new stuff, and this year being so full of new stuff, I wouldn't have gotten it.
You didn't do it for me because I wanted to play with
Shut up, Don. I love you, but I love Final Fantasy 16 more. But like, I just don't make infinite money, and I won't be able to keep up with new releases next year or for the next couple years. I pretty much, because I'm doing it now, I can't buy a brand new game for the next couple of years. But PoE is free to play.
Oh yeah,
it is, and we have stuff to help you out.
Yeah, so at some point we'll jump into that MMO series is going to be a very long running one, and I'm counting anything where you team up with people and play online. Like massively online stuff.
If you're ever going to Warframe, I'm going to be so happy.
Warframe is after PoE. They're
Okay.
back to back.
Okay.
So
Damn, okay.
yeah, now they are not early on the series because it's chronological, and I'm gonna break that chronology for 2 games. That's World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy 14 are gonna end the experience, and that's simply because they're long. They're
Yeah.
long. World of Warcraft I know is gonna take me a minimum of 500 hours, and I know that I'm gonna double platinum 14, and that's gonna take thousands. So
Thousands.
yeah, because I barely finished the base game and there are expansions, John. 450 hours took me to the base game.
So
Done.
surprisingly,
And I didn't even do the first
Don't
expansion.
worry, we'll play together
Well,
in 2032.
14 is going to be 14's the end. So we'll play Warframe, we'll play anything else before that. It'll be the last one, and it's the last one on purpose because I know I'll be playing it for probably well over a year on its own.
Yeah, probably switching
Right.
between different games.
With like breaks in the middle for a game on my backlog or something, you know?
Yeah.
And that's just the way that I play games, and I think it's going to be a very fun series to play through to rank like the top 10 MMOs. I think I would count Diablo 4 as an MMO after a couple expansions. Like I think
Yeah.
it's going to have the content, and if the thing that they're missing for me to count it would be some type of raid dungeon.
Yeah,
That's
like
what they're missing.
Where you fight a whole bunch of enemies, you reach the end, and you got to fight a
A
multi-stage,
big multi-stage raid boss that
big-
you're going to need like
big
15
chungus
people.
is there, and you have to defeat
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
If they had something where you could do it on your own, but it's gonna be insanely hard, and you really need like 15 people to capstone a dungeon, kind of like the world bosses, but to cap off a dungeon
Yeah.
that has really interesting like mechanics that I would qualify that. Probably will revisit it for that series, to be honest with you, when that content comes through, and I like that type of formula so far, and for me, Diablo 4 is my ARPG. It's the one that got me into the genre. To be honest with you, just like 14 is what opened my eyes to the MMO type stuff.
Yeah.
There's always that gateway game for a genre.
Gateway drug.
Well,
Yes,
I'm
I
going
mean,
to call it
it's
the
literally that.
gateway genre game.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, for like the JRPG, it was Final Fantasy X, and
Yeah.
that's my favorite game of the 2000s. For the Souls-like, it was for me Dark Souls 2, but Dark Souls 1 really.
Yeah.
Dark Souls 1, like I played Dark Souls 2 first because I knew it was the worst one. Dark Souls 1 is where I was like sold,
Yeah.
right? And Diablo 4 is finally the one where the genre clicked with me, whereas every other one has not.
Didn't you recently have it click for you for a roguelike because of Returnal, or was it
It wasn't Returnal. The roguelike that made the genre click for me was Risk of Rain 2.
Risk of Rain 2? Yep.
Yeah, and that's a genre that traditionally I very much was low on. I did not like it at all, like literally at all.
Yeah.
I avoided them like the plague, but then I played Risk of Rain 2, and I was like, this is really good. And it made me try out some other things like Enter the Gungeon, and I liked Enter the Gungeon. And Darkest Dungeon, which we talked about before, is the one I only played for like 10 minutes because it was a roguelike. Didn't like it. Or it had like roguelike-y elements.
It's like kind of rough.
It has like roguelike-y elements. I was like, I don't like it. I put it back on my list because I'm more open to roguelikes now and I want to play it again. So
You might want to just have a guide for each area. That's what I did when I actually played it to the end, because it sucks so bad when you lose level 6 character.
Because they punish you for not knowing the mechanics or anything.
And yes,
this is why I might start with Darkest Dungeon 2 because it's on PC. And if there's not, this is going to sound very strange for people who don't give a shit about trophies, but if there's not a trophy list, I don't even care if I finish the game or not. I just play it until I get bored or whatever. And so Darkest Dungeon 2 came out this year. I might, when I get a PC, I might just play Darkest Dungeon 2.
yeah.
It kind of
eventually.
it does like two birds with one stone. I get to play a game that's new this year, and I also get to kind of check out this game in a little bit more of a fresh mindset. So you might see Darkest Dungeon 2 on the channel at some point. I don't know. Not going to promise it yet, but because there's more important things, like you'll see Straight Fire 6 before you see Darkest Dungeon 2.
Let me just type that in real fast.
I think we pretty much covered the free-to-play type stuff. I'm typically pretty low on free-to-play. I'm of the opinion I'd rather just buy the game.
It depends on how they're monetizing.
Yeah.
EOE does a fantastic job. There is a buy-in level that makes sense, that is legitimately a good thing. We have effectively covered that with a guild stash tab.
Yeah.
As long as it's not predatory, I don't care if it's free to play. Because I think
and that's the whole. If it's just cosmetic, fine. If it's power level,
That's been
Yeah.
problematic.
all games are cash grabs. Like, I'm not stupid. They're all there to get my money. Like, that's why they're made.
Yeah.
Right? It's just that, like, if they're there to prey on your psychology and loot boxes and stuff like that. And I know I've heard the argument that, like, if the cash shop is cosmetic, that's fine. I agree and disagree with that idea because Diablo 4 has that as well, where the cash shop is completely like cosmetic stuff. I agree and disagree. I agree if the cosmetics that you can get in the game are already cool enough, but most of the time, in my experience with live service, that you buy in or are free to play, the stuff you can get naturally through progression is actually kind of stupid stuff. Like, and you don't get cool stuff unless you buy it. Diablo 4, at least I feel, has really cool armor set.
yeah, I don't like the full price and additional price.
I don't like that either, especially with if you're going to say it's 70 now instead of the normal. Well, I guess 70 is the normal now, but it was 60 before.
Yep.
And I have gotten my money's worth for the. I will have my money's worth for the 70 by the time I'm done playing the game, and I'm not going to buy extra like skins and stuff. But it really does feel bad when you pay full price for a game and then that happens. I wouldn't be shocked if 3 years from now Diablo 4 became kind of like followed the StarCraft 2 formula or something like that, where it's free to play up to a certain point. Now, even Final Fantasy 14 has done this, where you can play like the first 3 expansions for free.
No, okay.
So it's I'm fine with this because like I don't subscribe to the idea that like it's a fuck you to the players who bought it. I don't think that's true. It's just they're trying to infuse more people into the player base, and when a game is old enough, they have to do things to do that.
Yeah.
It's like the Ultimate Edition sales.
Right. If there's enough time, I think that's fine.
I think
if it's like, okay, we just released
the next year or
and
something.
it's free.
Yeah. I don't like that. But if it's a couple years down the line, I don't care because by that point I would have got my money's worth, and I might not even be playing the game anymore. So like the free to play is just to get people to play the game so that they can keep the live service going. That doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
What will bother me, because Blizzard does have a bad track record with ruining games at this point now, which is insane for me to think. Because if this were 2016, I would have said Blizzard was probably one of the best developers on the planet, behind From Software.
Yeah.
But even then, I might not have said From Software because in 2016, I hadn't played everything they made yet, and I didn't know that they made Armored Core and Tenchu and all my favorite like childhood games.
Yeah.
Nowadays, Blizzard is the company that ruins Warcraft 3 20 years after it came out.
Yep.
This is the company that ruined Overwatch,
Yep.
which multiple times, way more than twice. Overwatch in 2016, I will stand by that being one of the best
Overwatch
multiplayer.
and Overwatch 2.
Well,
Yeah.
Overwatch 1 has been ruined multiple times, right? The year it came out, it deserved all the accolades it got. It deserved to be as big as it got. It was because it genuinely was that fun and good.
I really enjoyed it.
And then very quickly, they did the fighting game Cardinal Sin, where they introduce a DLC fighting game character that's just better.
Yep.
Fighting games don't do this, and don't do this, and the ones that do it die immediately because it's a very bad system for a game that's very like character based and stuff like that. And Overwatch just produced characters that were broken, had to be patched, and that's just not the way that you do live service competitive games, right? Overwatch 2 ruined the economy. Overwatch 1 was the only game where I thought loot boxes were okay.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't too bad. You got gold, or you could buy things. Any item that you could get out of loot box, you can buy. But because Overwatch 2 is now free to play, they are now playing into the FOMO and stuff like that. FOMO is the fear of missing out. That was a little bit of an aside, but I'm just saying that because Diablo 4 right now for me, if I had to put a number out of 10, I'd say 9 out of 10. Right now for me.
Yeah. But maybe in 2 months' time, Activision Blizzard will be like, we're going to release DLC.
I don't think 2 months, but a year, 2 years. It could be ruined, and I want to point that out because this company is perfectly fine shitting on their long-running IPs. They've already shown that many times. WoW, I've never played World of Warcraft, but it did have a period of time where all the fans hated it. like the Mists of Pandaria and Warlords of Draenor and all these other things I've heard about only through secondhand stuff, right? But then they brought that one back to kind of goodness, but then they've kind of shit on Hearthstone before with its stuff, and then they've also just last year made Diablo Immortal. So I mean,
Just last year.
that was last year.
Oh, okay.
Right. And I think that they sometimes will do what I think Diablo 4 is going to be is going to be their goodwill project starting out at least, and World of Warcraft is going to be doing that, but they're just going to use that IP as a way of like creating like predatory side projects, I think.
Yep.
They don't want their like brand completely ruined forever, but they like make no mistake, like this game could be ruined in a couple years.
Blizzard now is just Activision wearing the skin of Blizzard.
Yeah.
It's just there's like, hi, we're Blizzard, buy our stuff. And it's like, Blizzard's that? Are you okay? Yes.
They've been this way for a long time. Everybody knows the stuff going on with the business. That stuff started pretty much right when Activision took over. And
Actually, no.
Really?
Activision,
2010 is when Activision took over.
No.
2009.
2008 is the date people remember, but I think that's just when they put their name on there. Activision has owned Blizzard for a long time.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I had watched a video that had the whole Diablo 1 fact, and I'll try to find it, but I believe Activision had bought Blizzard a long time ago, but was very hands-on.
This is very like difficult to say though, because like when you're talking about big purchases like this, sometimes they're purchases, but they don't really function in the way like I went to the store and bought something.
Right. I think they bought Blizzard, but they were very hands-off until 2008.
But that, don't quote me on this because I could be wrong. My facts could be a little misordered, but I think around 2008 and 2009 is when the problem started.
Yeah, that's at least when they fully became like Activision.
Because that's when there was a mass exodus of all the major Blizzard like employees, and that's also when the sexual harassment stuff started. So
2008 looks like the purchase. 2013 looked like the
like naming nomenclature change. That's here or there.
Yeah, it's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant right now, but it is something that you need to keep in mind if you want to play Diablo 4. Now's a good time. But if you're watching this like 3 years from now, this could very well be out of date by then. Okay, so just keep that in mind. As the title of this episode suggests, I haven't really named it yet, but it's probably going to be something like, is Diablo 4 the best ARPG ever made? Let's go through and answer that. I'll start. For me, it is the best one because it's the one I like.
Yeah.
It's the only one I like.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. And that is enough for me to say that it's the best one. And I absolutely am not the hardcore ARPG market. I am the new fan. And for the new fan, I think this is the best one to get into right now. As they had said, and as me listening to PoE, I would never touch PoE if I wasn't going to do content for it, or if I didn't have people that could guide me through it.
Oh, yeah.
John got me in, and John eventually said, hey, just do a build.
Yeah. So, like, that one, I think the floor is too high for somebody who's relatively new to the genre, and I think as a result that this is going to be a lot of people's first ARPG, and therefore it's going to be their favorite one.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times your first game in a genre becomes your favorite.
Yes, but PoE will eventually find them and draw them.
PoE 2 maybe. I think PoE 1 is too old to draw new players in, and PoE 2 is going to be the one that probably does that then. I'm excited to do the hardcore run. I'm excited for playing all the other classes. And I think for me that it's the synthesis of what I know to be an ARPG and also some of the MMO light mechanics. I've partied up with randos. I've done some good dungeon grindings. My problem with the franchise before this was that kind of like solitary experience that I got bored. With Diablo 1 being the outlier because Diablo 1 was not the ARPG formula that we know now.
Yeah.
And it's just not fun. It's this genre, I just don't like solitary forever. I like playing solo games. I'm a solo gamer first and foremost. But even when I played 14 and I would do things solo, you would have those interactions with players, and that's what really makes the world feel alive to me and what keeps me back, I think.
It's a benefit.
It has to be something where I don't even have to touch it at all, But I like when it's there, and I like when I have those interactions. Those are memorable to me. So that's part of why I really like the direction that this one took. As somebody who hasn't really clicked with this genre before, I like the sense of community, and I'm excited to play this game as new content drops, which usually I don't. When it comes to live service stuff, I just stop playing it. But I think this one I will come back to periodically. And I said this before, I'm going to split the platinum up, and I'm just going to do a piece of it now, and a piece of it when I'm between games, and a piece of it when new content drops, and so on and so forth.
And when the DLC releases, there'll be more stuff for platinums?
No, that's not the way they work.
Oh, really?
They have one trophy list, and sometimes they have side trophy lists for DLC, but it only impacts percentage, not platinum.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Like,
percentage of completion. So, for example, I have 66% of trophies in Ghost of Tsushima, but I still have the platinum because the DLCs are separate lists.
Yeah.
So, that's my opinion.
Yeah, well, as you can probably tell about how much I gushed, I freaking love PoE and stand by that. PoE is my favorite action RPG game. Despite how much I despise certain aspects of it because I've played so much of it, I've experienced the negative aspect of the fact that you have to play the campaign every time you play.
Which is
a new
something
character.
Diablo 4 cuts out, and I noticed it immediately.
I love Diablo 4 and Diablo 3 because of that. I love that aspect, and it's my favorite thing. And I would pay PoE like $30, $40, $50 to be allowed to say, I don't have to play the campaign after I play my first character. But they don't. You have to, every time you start a new character, to do that. But despite that, I freaking love the game and keep coming back to it, despite the fact that I'm like, I probably shouldn't. And then I'm like, but this time
there's a skill tree on your weapons.
Yeah, and you're like, no, PoE, no. And then you get dragged in, and it's so fun.
Yeah, so I with the PoE like type stuff, I think it's too complicated for me to want to jump in.
Oh, you know,
I would need to play way more Diablo 4 before I'd even want to touch it.
You don't have me and Jeremy help you out, and there's third party stuff that really helps with playing the game and make it streamlined, honestly. But like, yet again, I fully agree with you though. Yeah. When it comes to the skill floor, I mean, I only was able to play the game because I would literally look up like YouTube channel stuff talking about it, and that's what drew me in. And then builds where people basically like, follow this guideline, you'll be good, and then it works. So
okay.
Same boat. Other than I will point out, we have not played PoE for like 2 leagues or something.
Oh yeah, because we played a lot for like 3 leagues in a row.
Yeah, the last league we played, we checked off basically everything on our checklist. So when we went back for the next league, we started, but we didn't stay with it because we had done our checklist.
Yeah.
And I am starting to hit that a little bit with Diablo 3. Diablo 4 is I do want to like do more stuff, but I'm also in that like, what's
my goals?
What you're gonna get out of it type thing. So for like that whole like process there with like not like lacking things to do, that's kind of when I rotate things out.
Right. And there is still more stuff to do. There are the dungeons. I still have one more section for the Lilith statues, grinding to 70, unlocking tier 4. But my hope was to get a unique item to start building around.
Yeah.
That way I could be drawn back in a little bit more and actually like.
Yeah, I think with John saying that there's some things he didn't like PoE, I don't think that's a negative, because eventually you reach a certain point where you've just played a game so much that things that are probably pretty innocuous for somebody experiencing it for the first time just kind of grind your gears over 1,000 hours. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no.
Like it just chips away like a river cutting a new pathway type thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I kind of expected that. I expected me to be the one in the camp that says Diablo 4 is the best, and both of them to say PoE, because I've heard a lot about PoE over the last 10 years.
Yep.
Just like I've heard a lot about Warframe and some other things John has played a lot of. Whenever, a few years from now, I'm sure we'll have a podcast all about Warframe. And we'll probably have a And we'll probably have a whole podcast about PoE as well. I would say PoE eventually as well. So I hope you guys really enjoyed the episode. We're going to start going into the unwind here. And one of the things I want us to add to this closing section here is we all play a lot of games, play a variety of things. So I want to add a section where we talk about what we'd be playing at this time, at this exact moment. And for me, It's Diablo 4. I'm going to take breaks periodically. Like I said, I'll start Final Fantasy 16 the day it comes out. I'm almost finished with Metroid Prime Remastered, and if you guys follow the channel, you will see a playthrough of Ryan, who was on the last episode, and I playing through Resident Evil 6 together. But what about you guys?
Unfortunately, not much of a variety. Diablo 4 and good old brother Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to play Sheriff of Nottingham and Camelot today. We're doing board games after this. I bought Dishonored 1 and 2, and I have not touched those. I should probably do that.
Yeah. Well, as the title suggests, we're old and we have massive backlogs.
John wants me to play Darkest Dungeon 2 so I can let him know how good it is.
I need you to play Bloodborne. I need
Bloodborne, Demon's Souls.
You might actually want to wait on that because I heard a rumor that it's getting remastered. 60 FPS. So you might just wait, I think, at this point.
Yes.
Because you've waited enough.
Yes.
That's cool for me because I can double plat it.
Platinum whore.
Yes. I
Keep in mind, each one's 100 hours.
Oh my god.
This week might be a little hard, but hopefully those.
Yeah. At least it's not the Elden Ring one, which is like 300 hours.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I only know that because it was the reason I didn't buy it, right? I was like, I don't have 300 hours right now. I will probably just do a year from Software at some point and just platinum all of them. Every game they've made.
I'm going to take like 2 weeks off and play only software from Soft games for those weeks and just stay at home and be just off.
I can't tell you how colossally. If I had to guess, my game of the year is either going to end up being Final Fantasy 16 or Armored Core 6. If I had to guess, right now, it's not. Diablo 4 is number 2 right now. Well, it's number 3 if I count Metroid Prime Remastered, which I won't at the end of the year.
So how do you have 2 games that it might be one of them, and then number 2 goes to a third one?
Well, it's because it's Prime, and then Tears of the Kingdom is number 1.
Okay.
Tears of the Kingdom is still number 1 right now. I just think that it's so unique, and even though Diablo 4 kind of opened the genre for me, it just doesn't compete for me right now.
For me.
And but I am such a huge Final Fantasy fan that I would be shocked if Final Fantasy 16 wasn't at least number 2. And then I'm such an Armored Core fan, and From Software we know are top of the class in terms of game design. I would be shocked if it wasn't 1 or 2 as well. So that's what I'm playing right now. That's what they're playing. It's time for our goodbyes.
I've been John. It's been fun.
I don't know what I'm doing.
I want to have a little end cap here at the end of each one of these, so I wrote something for you guys. I know that fighting endless ranks of the onslaught of demons and grinding dungeons all day can get pretty tough and soul-crushing and tedious. That's my experience with the ARPG genre, and sometimes life is like that too. But remember, you can always party up with some people and get through that shit pretty quick, and hopefully you get some nice sexy loot at the end. So cheers, guys, and we'll see you around on the next episode.